Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we're starting part 1 of an awesome What If Deku Had a Harem with Momo story. If you want to see part 2, drop a comment below and tell me what you think. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. It really helps the channel grow. Now sit back, relax, and let's jump into the story. I'm sorry, but it's very unlikely that you can become a hero. Those words echoed painfully in Izuku Midoriya's mind, spoken by the man he had admired most. Today had been particularly difficult for him, more than just the usual teasing and bullying. As a second-year middle school student, he found himself at the very bottom of the social hierarchy. To make matters worse, news of his intention to attend UA High School had spread, and his childhood friend-turned-bully, Katsuki Bakugo, was furious about it. Katsuki loomed over Izuku, his palms emitting smoke and a wicked grin on his face that promised torment. Despite his claims of wanting to be a hero, he was the most villainous person Izuku knew, even if he hesitated to voice it. After retrieving his burnt notebook, Izuku hoped that things could only improve. How mistaken he was. On his way home, he took an underground tunnel to evade Katsuki and his gang, only to unexpectedly collide with the last person he could have imagined. All Might, the symbol of peace and number one hero. The impact left Izuku stunned, unable to articulate his thoughts. He managed to stammer something about an autograph while offering his charred notebook to the towering hero. All Might cheerfully signed it and mentioned he was searching for a dangerous villain lurking in the sewers. Just before departing, Izuku summoned his courage to ask a burning question about whether a quirkless child could become a hero. All Might considered the question, recognizing that being quirkless would be a significant disadvantage. However, he recalled the extensive notes he had on various quirks and heroes, realizing that knowledge could compensate for a lack of strength. And now, with bitter tears in his eyes, Izuku wandered aimlessly through the streets of Musutafu. Becoming a hero was his greatest aspiration, and in a cruel twist of fate, the man who had always been a beacon of hope had shattered his dreams. Izuku felt as if he had been compared to an empty glass, a mere waste of space, and now he was broken. He lacked the strength to even attempt to piece himself back together. It felt as though he had lost his reason to live. Suddenly, a scream pierced through his despair, snapping him back to reality. It was a feminine voice. Somehow, he had strayed to the entrance of a dark alley. There, he saw a tall, muscular man with pink hair and red markings on his face, resembling war paint. A young woman with silky black hair tied in a spiky ponytail was pinned against the wall. The sight of the man's quirk, which allowed him to transform his arms into sharp blades, sent a chill down Izuku's spine. The man shouted angrily at the young woman, who could only whimper and plead silently for help as he pointed his blade arm at her. He promised her that if she behaved, they would both benefit from the situation. Tears filled her eyes as she realized his sinister intentions. From his hiding spot behind a dumpster, Izuku felt panic rising within him. He thought frantically about the situation, realizing that the girl was in grave danger. He couldn't confront the man directly. He opened his notebook and flipped through the pages until he found an entry about the ninja hero, Edgeshot, who ended fights swiftly with precise strikes to vital points. With the man's back turned, Izuku considered targeting his neck, but hesitated, wondering if the attacker could defend himself there as well. Just then, he noticed a thick, rusted steel pipe at his feet. An idea began to form. The man was focused on the girl, oblivious to any attack from behind. Izuku climbed onto the dumpster lid, careful to remain silent. The other two were unaware of his presence, just as he had hoped. With a deep breath, he leaped. The man had snagged the girl's shirt with his blade. She closed her eyes tightly, bracing for the worst. He licked his lips, preparing to enjoy his cruel intentions, when suddenly a solid pipe struck him at the nape of his neck. The girl opened her eyes to see her attacker collapse to the ground, and before her stood a green-haired boy her age, holding the steel pipe. She quickly pieced together what had happened, overwhelmed by the sudden turn of events. Meanwhile, Izuku observed the man before relaxing his guard. He felt a sense of relief wash over him, having successfully subdued the attacker. However, he noticed a piece of fabric lying next to the assailant. Before he could ponder its significance, the girl he had just rescued rushed toward him, her eyes glistening with tears. She expressed her gratitude, bowing deeply and thanking him profusely for saving her. Izuku experienced an unfamiliar sensation as she thanked him, feeling a warmth in his chest. He dismissed the thought that he was anything special, attributing his success to sheer luck. He began to ask if she was injured, but the words caught in his throat as he finally took a good look at her. Before him stood a strikingly beautiful young girl with silky black hair and deep shimmering eyes that sparkled like a lake at dawn. She had a mature figure that would make many envious, standing slightly taller than him. Yet, what made him freeze was her state of undress. In the heat of the moment, when he had knocked out the thug, his blade had accidentally torn her shirt, revealing more than intended. Izuku struggled to handle the sight, his face turning crimson as he quickly covered his eyes. The girl, initially confused, looked down and realized her wardrobe malfunctioned. She blushed but remained composed, unlike her flustered savior. He fumbled to retrieve the torn fabric, finding it challenging with his eyes covered. He held it up to her, bowing deeply and expressing his embarrassment. He repeatedly apologized, overwhelmed with mortification as he knelt before her. The girl, bewildered by his reaction, noted that he had saved her, yet here he was, acting as if he had done something wrong. While he had caught a glimpse, it was unintentional, and he hadn't stared. She took a part of her shirt to cover herself more adequately. She reassured him that he had nothing to apologize for. Once she felt decent again, he stood up, still blushing and unable to meet her gaze, staring at his feet instead. He expressed his relief that she was okay, and in a flash, dashed away before she could say another word. Her gaze fell on the unconscious thug, forcing her to relive the traumatic experience. Then she looked down the path her savior had taken, committing every detail of him to memory. His unruly green hair, emerald eyes, freckles adorning his cheeks, and his sweet voice. She wondered if he wore an Aldera uniform. Her attention shifted to the closed dumpster he had jumped from, where he had left behind a blue notebook. The title read Hero Analysis for the Future, and she noticed a page open to Edgeshot, detailing a technique for a strike to the neck. As she browsed through it, she was astonished by the depth of information, realizing he was on par with some of the quirk theory books she had read. Inside the cover, she found his name, Izuku Midoriya. After using her quirk to patch herself up, she held the notebook close to her chest. The charred paper stained her clothing, but she was too focused on the boy to care. After a few moments of standing still, she decided to call the authorities to apprehend the attacker while he was still unconscious. Meanwhile, Izuku's legs moved rapidly as he raced home, desperately trying to erase the image of the girl from his mind. He was so flustered that he nearly collided with Bakugo during his frantic dash. He barely registered Bakugo's angry shouts, but he was aware that his friend was furious. Finally, he reached the safety of his home, bursting through the front door and heading straight to his bedroom. With his mother not expected home until later, dinner preparations fell to him, which he didn't mind. In truth, he desperately needed a distraction. He tossed his backpack onto the floor and flopped onto his bed, letting out a muffled scream into his pillow. He thought to himself that he had seen too much. While he had helped her, the attacker hadn't intentionally exposed her, yet he had witnessed more than the assailant. Panic set in as he worried that she might report him to the police as well. Sitting up, he glanced around his All Might-themed room, seeking solace in its familiarity. He felt a wave of disappointment wash over him as he heard the words that suggested his dreams of becoming a hero were unlikely. Taking a moment to gather himself, he inhaled deeply, seeking solace in the fresh air. Rising slowly, he stepped outside and leaned against the railing of his front porch, his gaze fixed on the vibrant hues of the setting sun, the warm breeze brushing against his face. Gratitude filled his heart as he reflected on the life he had saved, despite the discouragement from number one. He thought to himself that he disagreed with All Might's assessment. With a small smile, he looked toward the horizon, feeling a sense of closure. Even if he could not become a professional hero, he could still be a hero to someone. Momo Yaoyorozu, the heiress to a vast fortune, possessed not only wealth but also beauty that could attract anyone she desired. Many envied her life, but beneath the surface it was not as perfect as it seemed. Her elevated status often hindered her ability to form genuine connections. Some feared her influence, while others assumed she was a spoiled individual. In reality, Momo was kind-hearted, albeit a bit straightforward and innocent. Although she had friends, their interest in her was often tied to her wealth and status. Unbeknownst to her, she accepted this as normal, never questioning the monthly fees that came with their friendship. Her parents, busy managing a multi-billion-yen company, often left her to dine alone, even when they were home. Despite her belief in her independence, she was still as a child grappling with the weight of her circumstances. Momo's beauty and wealth drew attention from powerful families and companies eager to align with her family. Many sought to secure a connection through marriage, adding pressure to her already complicated life. Since turning 13, she had been introduced to numerous wealthy suitors, often encountering arrogant and superficial individuals who were more interested in her family's fortune than in her as a person. The shallow marriage proposals only added to the burden on the Yaoyorozu family. Given these challenges, it was understandable that Momo hesitated to share her recent encounter with her parents, fearing it would only add to their worries. However, she knew better than to keep the truth from them. When they returned home after her experience, she recounted what had happened. As she expected, they were horrified at the thought of their only daughter being threatened by a stranger. But when she mentioned that a young man had come to her aid, their curiosity was piqued. She shared everything about her green-haired savior. Izuku Midoriya from Aldera Middle School, her father mused, noting the details. He learned that he lived in a middle-class apartment building in Musutafu. Momo's mother, holding the notebook Momo had picked up, remarked on the boy's peculiar nature. Momo recalled how he had turned away so quickly upon seeing her that she feared he might hurt himself. After she had covered herself, he had apologized sincerely. Her parents found his behavior refreshing. "I believe we should reward Mr. Midoriya for his heroism and manners," her father suggested. Momo felt a blush creeping onto her cheeks as she mentioned she had something in mind, but first she needed to return his belongings. This did not go unnoticed by her mother, who encouraged her to deliver it personally, recognizing the value of a thoughtful gesture. Momo's cheeks flushed deeper as she insisted it was simply the right thing to do. She had not had the chance to thank him properly or introduce herself, and she intended to rectify that. Her father, while understanding her intentions, felt a sense of caution after the incident. He suggested that one of them should accompany her to ensure her safety. Momo appreciated her father's concern but expressed her desire not to appear overly forceful. She believed it would be better if he did not feel pressured. However, to ease her father's worries, she agreed to have one of their security guards drive her the next morning, stepping into a limousine that felt anything but intimidating. The Midoriyas, it had been 3 days since he had saved her, the raven-haired beauty he rescued in an alley. After he told his mother, she had cried with a mix of fear and pride. She was terrified that her only son had put himself in danger, yet proud that he had used his intelligence to help someone. There was also sadness when she learned about the other significant meeting he had that day. All Might himself had told him it was impossible. Before she could attempt to console him or worry that he might sink into a deeper sadness, he looked at her with a smile. He assured her that while it hurt, he was ready to let go of his dream. In that moment, when he had actually saved someone and received their gratitude, it felt as if his dream had become a reality. Inko was immensely proud of her son's growth and vowed to support him wholeheartedly in whatever he chose to pursue, as long as he didn't put himself in dangerous situations. Currently, the Midoriya matriarch was washing the dishes after a satisfying breakfast. It was Saturday, and she hoped for a relaxing, stress-free day with her rejuvenated son. Just the two of them and a completely uneventful day ahead. Ding dong! Her attention was drawn to the front door. A visitor? Inko wondered as she approached to greet them. Mitsuki would have called if she wanted to visit, and it couldn't be the landlord. She worked double shifts to pay the rent. Inko opened the door. On the other side stood Momo, shuffling her feet and nervously clutching her shoulder bag. She thought to herself that she shouldn't be so anxious. She hadn't even stepped inside yet. The suitors she had encountered never seemed scared or genuinely interested in her, just her appearance and wealth. That thought, though somewhat bitter, calmed her and reminded her of why she was there. She encouraged herself to remain friendly, recalling that if his previous behavior was any indication, she shouldn't come off as hostile. Suddenly, the door opened, revealing a short, chubby woman with green hair. She greeted Momo with a warm smile and asked if she could help. Momo introduced herself as Mrs. Midoriya, and Inko scrutinized the girl carefully. The silky raven hair in a ponytail, dark eyes, and slightly taller stature than her son matched the description Izuku had given her. However, Inko reminded herself not to jump to conclusions. Even if it was her, how could she have found out where they lived? They hadn't even exchanged names. Momo apologized for the sudden intrusion and explained that she had something that belonged to Izuku. She pulled out a blue notebook that Inko recognized instantly. That revelation connected the dots for Inko. She hesitated before asking if Momo was the young lady her son had rescued. She hated to bring up such a delicate subject, but needed to know before proceeding. Momo blushed as she confirmed her identity. After being rescued, Izuku had run off so quickly that she hadn't had a chance to thank him, and she thought it would mean more to express her gratitude in person. Inko opened the door wider, inviting her in and offering to prepare tea and sweets. Momo gladly accepted the invitation, expressing her appreciation. As Momo entered, she immediately noticed the stark contrast between their lifestyles. The living room and kitchen were so close together that they might as well have been in the same room. Even combined, they were roughly the size of her closet at home. However, it didn't feel cramped. Rather, it was a cozy space. Inko called out to Izuku, announcing that he had a visitor before leaving to prepare snacks. She felt comfortable leaving the two of them alone for a moment, as Izuku had mentioned that Momo wasn't from his middle school, so she likely didn't have to worry about her bullying him. Momo took a seat on one of the green sofas in front of the TV. Izuku emerged from his room to greet their guest. Based on his mother's words, she was there specifically for him. Unless it was one of his bullies, he wondered who could possibly want to see him. He received his answer when he entered the living room and spotted the beautiful young lady he had saved. Their eyes met, and both of them froze. Momo stood up from her seat, clutching her purse tightly. She greeted him hesitantly, and he waved back nervously. Inko stood off to the side, listening intently. Momo then pulled out the notebook and returned it to Izuku, explaining that he had left it behind in the alley. He accepted the book with shaky hands, feeling a wave of anxiety wash over him. If she had looked inside, she must have seen all his notes about heroes. He braced himself for the ridicule he had grown accustomed to. He felt a wave of embarrassment wash over him as he realized she had seen his notes. It was a bit unsettling, and he acknowledged that it might come off as creepy. However, her response surprised him. She found his work impressive. He stood there, taken aback, wondering if he had misheard her. Did this beautiful girl really just commend him for his seemingly useless hobby? He stared at her in genuine shock, and she quickly tried to clarify. She introduced herself as Momo Yaoyorozu, and he shook his head slightly, trying to regain his composure. He introduced himself as Izuku Midoriya, assuming she already knew that. It was nice to meet her, he thought, even as Momo shuffled her feet nervously. She then expressed her regret for having read his notes without permission. She admitted to feeling ashamed for invading his privacy, explaining that his detailed theories on quirks and heroes were too captivating to resist. Instead of reacting with disdain as she expected, he looked at her with bright eyes that sparkled like emeralds. Momo continued, complimenting the quality of his notes, asking if he possessed an intelligence quirk. Izuku's expression shifted to one of sadness, and he quietly revealed that he was quirkless. He had been studying quirks since childhood, wishing he had one. His voice was barely above a whisper, and Momo understood the stigma surrounding those without quirks. She recognized the pain in his eyes, realizing he had grown up feeling worthless. Determined to uplift him, she spoke from her heart, expressing admiration for his bravery. To act selflessly in a dire situation without any power was something many could only aspire to. Izuku was momentarily speechless, trying to process her words. The realization that she accepted him as he was filled him with warmth. Momo then expressed her gratitude for his courageous actions. He had intervened in a dangerous situation, risking himself to help her when no one else was around. She recounted how helpless she had felt, and how his selflessness had made a profound impact on her. Tears welled in her eyes as she bowed deeply, thanking him for being her hero. Those words resonated deeply within him. After years of feeling inadequate, hearing her call him a hero was everything he had longed to hear. When she lifted her head, he saw sincerity in her gaze, and it overwhelmed him. Inko, his mother, listened intently, her heart swelling with joy for her son. She felt an overwhelming sense of happiness for him, tears of pride streaming down her cheeks. Izuku was experiencing an indescribable moment. This girl had praised his hobby, accepted his quirkless status, and called him her hero. It was more than he had ever hoped for, and the emotions surged within him. He felt his breath hitch as he clutched his chest, trying to hold back tears. Despite his efforts, he couldn't contain his emotions. Tears streamed down his face, but he tried to maintain his composure, not wanting to appear weak in front of her. He made a mental note to let it all out once she left. Momo, noticing his distress, reached into her purse and handed him some tissues. Her simple act of kindness only brought forth more tears. She gently helped him wipe his cheeks, reassuring him that he had nothing to apologize for. After a few minutes, Izuku and Inko managed to calm down, and they all sat together, enjoying lemon balm tea and cookies. Momo complimented the cookies and tea, and Inko graciously responded, feeling grateful for the lovely girl who had brought such joy to her son. Inko silently hoped that Izuku would cherish this connection. After finishing their snacks, the Midoriya family bid a warm farewell to their lovely guest. It was then that Momo recalled the other reason for her visit. She expressed that something important had slipped her mind. Izuku's curiosity was piqued. She had already returned his belongings and expressed her gratitude. What else could she possibly need to do? She looked at Izuku with her captivating onyx eyes, causing him to blush. Momo began to speak about Izuku's selflessness, kindness, respect, and intelligence, marveling at how someone like him could be belittled. She took slow steps toward him, and Izuku felt his heart race, his body tense, and his thoughts slow down. She knelt down and took his left hand in both of hers. The Midoriya family was completely taken aback until Momo posed her question. She asked if he would marry her. The only sound that followed was the thud of Izuku collapsing onto the floor, unconscious. Meanwhile, in the Yaoyorozu mansion, Mr. and Mrs. Yaoyorozu were enjoying a peaceful late morning, temporarily free from the work they had brought home. Mrs. Yaoyorozu wore an amused smile. Her husband inquired about her cheerful demeanor. She replied that it was simply about Momo and her little scheme. Mr. Yaoyorozu sighed as he reached for his cup of tea. He understood Momo's reasoning. If she were already in a marriage they approved of, the persistent suitors would stop pursuing their daughter. However, he expressed concern about her wanting to marry a boy she had just met. While he acknowledged that Izuku had rescued her and displayed decency, he still had reservations. Mrs. Yaoyorozu reassured him that Momo was mature enough to make wise decisions and that it was better than seeing her with vain narcissists. Yaoyorozu set down his cup and sighed again, admitting that he trusted his daughter and held no ill will toward Izuku Midoriya. However, he felt a twinge of sadness at how quickly Momo was growing up. He reflected on how he and his wife had married at an age 5 years older than her, and most people engaged even 10 years older. He still needed to meet the boy, and while he didn't want to suspect him, he worried that once Izuku saw Momo's lifestyle, he might view her as a mere opportunity for profit. In the Midoriya household, everything was dark. Izuku groaned lightly, feeling as if he were floating, but not in a pleasant way. He began to hear his mother's muffled voice. As light gradually filled his vision, he realized he was on the couch with his mother holding his hand and an open pack of smelling salts nearby. He groaned, holding his head as he sat up. Inko, filled with concern, asked if he was okay. He replied that he had just experienced the craziest dream. Inko, unsure whether to encourage him to continue, asked if he really had. He excitedly recounted how the angelic girl he had mentioned appeared at their door, called him her hero, and proposed to him. From across the room, a voice squeaked out in disbelief, asking if he really meant Angel. Izuku turned to see a red-faced Momo sitting on the opposite couch. He asked if it had been real, his fear evident. The two ladies nodded slowly. Taking a deep breath, Izuku grabbed a nearby pillow and covered his face, muffling his mortified screams. Though hard to decipher, Inko and Momo could make out his cries of despair. Once he finished venting, he bowed to Momo in embarrassment, apologizing profusely for his outburst. He stuttered that she was beautiful, but that he shouldn't have blurted it out. Momo stopped him with a gentle smile and two simple words of gratitude. Deku paused, observing her expression and body language, blushing cheeks, a small smile, hands clutching her skirt, and avoiding eye contact. Was she flustered by him? Inko found the entire scene endearing, nearly forgetting her earlier question. Momo asked if he had truly proposed to her. Izuku quickly assured her that he was very much single, though neither of them could quite understand how someone like him could be. Momo felt a wave of confusion wash over her as she tried to explain the situation. She took a deep breath and introduced herself again, mentioning her family's ownership of Yaoyorozu Industries. A moment of silence followed before Izuku's excitement broke through. He exclaimed in disbelief, recognizing the name of the company that produced top-tier support items for heroes and catered to unique quirks. Momo was taken aback by his enthusiasm for her family's business. He expressed admiration for the impact her family's products had on some of the highest-ranked heroes, clearly fascinated by everything related to quirks and heroics. Momo appreciated his kind words, while Inko, Izuku's mother, took the opportunity to look up the company on her phone. As she read about the numerous high-quality support items and global sponsorships, she felt overwhelmed. The company's contributions to shelters for endangered species, research into quirk science, and donations to schools and hospitals filled her with pride. She couldn't help but wonder if it was time for Izuku and Momo to explore a romantic relationship. Izuku, still processing the information, questioned why someone from such an esteemed family would want to marry him. Inko's eyes widened as she realized the implications of his words. Momo explained that while she had met many boys of similar status, they often lacked the qualities she admired in Izuku. She assured him that he was free to decline her proposal, but she felt a sense of gratitude toward him. Izuku interrupted, insisting that he hadn't acted with the expectation of a reward, which further impressed Momo. The only adult present then interjected, reminding Momo that marriage was a serious matter that should involve discussions with her parents as well. Momo agreed, stating that she had come to propose and would arrange a proper discussion at her home. She wrote down her address and contact information, emphasizing that the decision was entirely up to Izuku. After thanking them for their hospitality, she gathered her belongings and left. Izuku watched her depart in a limousine, feeling a mix of disbelief and confusion as he slid down the door to sit on the mat. He questioned what had just happened, and Inko, feeling equally bewildered, suggested that they might need something stronger than tea to process it all. She decided to take a cold shower to clear her mind. After a period of reflection, Izuku expressed his frustration about how to respond to Momo's proposal. He paced back and forth, overwhelmed by his feelings for her. He admired her beauty and kindness, noting that she accepted him despite his lack of a quirk. Inko remained silent, still contemplating the paper Momo had left behind. Izuku lamented that this unexpected situation was complicating his journey as a hero. He wished for a moment of victory without any complications. When he turned his attention to the paper, he noticed it contained not just contact details, but also a check made out to him for 30 million yen. The realization left him stunned, as he understood that this amount was insignificant to the Yayorozu family. Feeling tested by the universe, he turned to his mother for guidance. Inko finally gathered her thoughts and asked how he felt about everything. Izuku admitted he was unsure, acknowledging Momo's amazing qualities and good intentions. However, the idea of marriage felt daunting, especially since he had never even had a girlfriend. He questioned why someone like Momo would be interested in him when there were others who could offer her the world. Inko held her son's hand and asked if he wanted her honest opinion, her tone raising caution within him. He responded affirmatively. She expressed her fear not of the girl, whom she considered an absolute angel, but of her powerful family. Inko acknowledged that it was wrong to judge someone before meeting them, but she worried that they could ruin their lives if they chose to. She mentioned that while arranged marriages were encouraged in the past and still are in some places, many of them quickly become abusive and toxic. She then held up the check that had caused them both to freeze earlier. Inko noted that when the girl spoke about their situation, it felt more like a business deal, as if she were acquiring him. Although she believed the girl didn't mean it that way, it felt as though she was trying to buy him. Inko felt that the girl didn't grasp the seriousness of marriage. Izuku absorbed her words, but when he felt hot tears on his hand, he looked directly at her. However, when he heard the wonderful things the girl had said to him, he felt immense happiness. For the first time, someone other than his mother or friends saw past his quirklessness and recognized him as a smart, brave, heroic young man. Inko admitted she would love to see him in a relationship with her, but marriage seemed too soon, especially since he was still in middle school. She expressed uncertainty about what he should do, wiping her eyes and tear-stained cheeks. She then reassured him that it was a good thing the decision was not solely hers. Izuku's eyes widened as she continued, acknowledging his maturity and intelligence in making important decisions. Although he was still young and this was something he would typically face years later, Inko meant what she said. She held both of his hands, looking at him with teary eyes and a smile, affirming her support no matter what he decided. Izuku felt overwhelmed and began to cry, realizing how wonderful and patient his mother was. He wept into her chest for a while as she stroked his back to comfort him. After collecting himself, he stood up and spoke to his mother. He understood her caution and concerns, recognizing that jumping into marriage so soon could lead to disaster. However, he recalled how the girl had thanked him and allowed herself to be vulnerable, trusting him enough to do so. It was in that moment that he began to feel something deeper. He decided he needed a second opinion. Inko reflected on her own experiences and thought about who else he could ask. Suddenly, Izuku had an idea. He hurriedly put on his favorite red sneakers, grabbed his short-sleeve hoodie, and dashed out the door, announcing he was going to see Aunt Mitsuki. As he jogged through the afternoon, he sought to clear his cluttered mind. With his situation weighing heavily on him, he desperately needed help. Running was his first step, allowing the exercise to help him organize his thoughts. He recalled the encouraging words he had received from others, feeling inspired by their belief in him. He pushed himself to run another lap around the block, determined to reach Aunt Mitsuki, who he knew would be available on a Saturday afternoon. Meanwhile, two delinquents were on their way to a friend's house. One had short black hair and the other had long, pale brown hair. The black-haired boy expressed his frustration about the long wait until summer break, while the brown-haired boy suggested they could simply ditch school as it wouldn't matter much at that point. Their conversation was interrupted by the sound of hurried footsteps. They turned to see Izuku dash past them without a word, leaving them surprised. The black-haired boy remarked that Izuku was supposed to start running only after they threatened him, while the brown-haired boy noted that Izuku had been doing that a lot lately, which was starting to annoy him. Before continuing their walk, they noticed something about their friend's direction. They paused, realizing that Deku was running toward a certain place, and one of them commented that it seemed like he was about to do something reckless. Meanwhile, Deku finally arrived at his destination after circling it a few times to calm himself down. He was out of breath, resting his hands on his knees. Approaching the door, he could hear shouting from inside. He thought to himself that it was clear she was home. To boost his confidence, he slapped his cheeks a few times, causing them to flush red. As he continued to hype himself up, the others he had passed caught up with him, noticing he was about to knock. One of them suggested they should intervene, but another insisted that it would be entertaining. Deku knocked, but there was no response. Not surprised, he knocked harder, only to hear the muffled sounds of yelling inside. Frustrated, he pulled back his fist and knocked again with more force. Suddenly, the door swung open, revealing Katsuki Bakugo standing there, his nose bleeding. Deku was taken aback, and before he could react, Katsuki grabbed him by the collar, lifting him slightly off the ground. Deku found himself staring into Katsuki's furious red eyes, which were filled with intense anger. Katsuki's hand crackled with small bursts of heat and light. The onlookers stood in shock, their mouths agape as they processed what had just happened. Deku had just struck Katsuki in the face, and it seemed like he was in serious trouble. This commotion caught the attention of Mitsuki Bakugo, who rushed over to see what was happening. She demanded to know what Katsuki was doing. Katsuki shouted back at her, urging her to stay out of it. Deku suddenly realized his mistake. He had completely forgotten that Katsuki lived there, and panic set in as he watched the other two retreat from the Bakugo household. Mitsuki managed to pull her son away from Deku, and they began to argue heatedly. She chastised him for attacking a guest, especially one like Izuku. Katsuki protested, claiming he had been provoked. Mitsuki expressed her frustration, wishing that a good punch would knock some sense into him. At that moment, Masaru Bakugo came to investigate the noise and allowed Deku to enter. Izuku quickly explained that it had all been an accident. He had knocked on the door without realizing it was open and had forgotten that Katsuki lived there. Katsuki, still fuming, threatened that he would make sure Deku wouldn't forget again. Before Katsuki could retaliate, his mother held him back, insisting that one punch didn't make up for all the bullying. She encouraged Deku to stand up for himself, but Deku felt too intimidated to even look at Katsuki. He insisted that he wasn't there for a fight. Mitsuki then asked what they could do for him, smiling warmly. They settled on the couches while Masaru attempted to tend to Katsuki's injury in the kitchen. Katsuki, in a nasally voice, insisted he didn't need help, while Masaru tried to calm him down. Mitsuki interrupted their bickering, urging them to be quiet so she could talk to Izuku. She asked what was on his mind, and he hesitated before mentioning a girl. Katsuki interrupted again, making a sarcastic remark about how no girl would want anything to do with Deku. Mitsuki smacked Katsuki on the head for his comment and encouraged Izuku to continue. Feeling uneasy about lying to his aunt and uncle, Deku explained that he had helped a girl on the street. He knew he had to keep Momo's experience private out of respect for her, even if it felt wrong to hide the truth. Mitsuki seemed to pick up on the situation, her tone playful, but Katsuki interrupted once more, insisting that no girl would ever be interested in Deku. Izuku looked down, feeling defeated, prompting Mitsuki to scold her son even more. Masaru settled beside Izuku, offering him encouragement. He reminded the young boy that he was kind and intelligent, and any girl would be fortunate to date him. Izuku felt a spark of hope at those words, though he hesitated to share his feelings. He mentioned that a girl had shown interest in him. Katsuki interrupted, dismissing Izuku's thoughts. He suggested that if a girl approached Izuku, she must either be unattractive or seeking something from him. He was mistaken about both points. Mitsuki, frustrated, shouted at Katsuki, expressing her anger over his behavior and the disruption it caused to their plans. Katsuki's harsh words stung Izuku, making him doubt himself. He wondered if Katsuki might be right about the girl. What if he embarrassed her or made a mistake that pushed her away? He thought it might be easier to remain quiet and let her take the lead. Suddenly, Mitsuki snapped him out of his thoughts with a light chop to his head. She had a serious expression and urged him to stop feeling sorry for himself. She pointed out that if he couldn't see his own worth, how could he expect to build a meaningful relationship? She encouraged him to have confidence, reminding him of his many positive qualities. Izuku listened intently, realizing that Mitsuki's honesty was a gift. She believed in him, and her words made him emotional. She highlighted that he was considerate of others, which was likely something this girl appreciated about him. However, she stressed the importance of speaking up and making his voice heard in the budding relationship. Feeling inspired, Izuku wiped his tears and looked at Mitsuki with newfound determination. He declared that he knew what he needed to do. Mitsuki beamed with pride, encouraging him further. As they prepared to say goodbye, Masaru wished Izuku luck, confident he would make the right choice. Izuku thanked him and felt a blush rise at the mention of his potential romantic interest. He promised to share more about her soon. Just as he was about to leave, Mitsuki playfully called out, teasing him about a wedding. Izuku froze, flustered, before shaking it off and reminding himself to stay focused. He resolved to give his answer to Yaoyorozu the following evening, walking away with a sense of purpose. Meanwhile, Masaru and Mitsuki exchanged thoughts about their earlier conversation. Mitsuki reflected on the advice she had received from her mother, which had served her well in her own love life. Masaru, amused, noted that he was surprised she hadn't suggested Izuku be more aggressive. Mitsuki laughed, explaining that Izuku had already shown he knew how to stand up for himself. The next day, Momo struggled to concentrate on her studies. Her mind kept drifting to Izuku, the boy she had proposed to. She had turned down many proposals in the past without regret, but her thoughts lingered on her interaction with him. She felt a twinge of guilt, realizing that she might have been using him as a way to shield herself from her own feelings. Before she could think about it any longer, a servant entered her room. He informed Lady Momo that Izuku Midoriya had arrived with his mother, and that her parents were speaking with them in the grand hall. Momo was surprised by how quickly he had made up his mind. She thanked him and began preparing herself. A few minutes earlier, Izuku and Inko stood outside the impressively large mansion. Inko expressed her astonishment, and Izuku echoed her sentiment, both at a loss for words. The front doors opened, and the head butler greeted them, guiding them inside. Their eyes widened at the opulent furniture and the vastness of the entryway. The first room they encountered was larger than their entire apartment. Remembering their manners, they stopped staring and followed the butler to the grand hall, where they were met by a tall man with short black hair and a commanding presence. Beside him stood a woman a few inches shorter with black hair and long sideburns, her figure clearly reminiscent of Momo's. Both were dressed in exquisite clothing. The head butler bowed and left them to converse. Mr. Yaoyorozu welcomed the Midoriyas with warmth, introducing himself as Sakusei Yaoyorozu and his wife, Ai. Inko and Izuku shook hands with them, striving to remain composed. Izuku expressed his gratitude for their hospitality, and Ai reassured him that their kindness was a small gesture in return. Soon all four were seated, and Izuku and Inko noticed Momo was not present. Sakusei began by thanking Izuku for his bravery in protecting their daughter, acknowledging the fear they felt at the thought of her being harmed. Ai echoed her husband's sentiment, emphasizing how precious their child was to them and how grateful they were to Izuku. Flustered by their praise, Izuku insisted that he was just relieved that Momo was safe. The Yaoyorozus observed him carefully, impressed by his humility. Sakusei thought to himself that he had expected Izuku to mention his feelings about the situation, but the boy had not made it about himself. I then steered the conversation back on track, mentioning Momo's visit the previous day with a proposal. Inko interjected, asking if they were truly okay with it. The Yaoyorozus exchanged glances before responding that, while they were surprised by Momo's choice to propose to a boy she had met in an alley, they recognized it as a sound decision. They explained that previous suitors had sought their daughter for selfish reasons. and they wanted the best for her, a sentiment Inko understood deeply. I remarked that when Momo spoke of Izuku as a selfless and brave young man, they could not refuse her request. This led to the pivotal question: how did Izuku feel about becoming Momo's groom? Izuku felt the weight of the question that had been on his mind, gripping his pants nervously. He recalled the advice he had received from Mitsuki and expressed his honor at being considered a suitable life partner. However, he asked where Momo was, believing she deserved to hear his answer directly. This caught the Yaoyorozus off guard, as other suitors had never requested their daughter's involvement. Sakusei agreed to fetch Momo, and as they left, Izuku released a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Inko checked on him, and he admitted he was surprised he hadn't felt sick. She reassured him that he was doing well, noting that they clearly liked him and encouraging him to speak from the heart. Meanwhile, Sakusei and I walked through the halls of their grand home, discussing their impressions of Izuku. Sakusei remarked that Izuku seemed like a fine young man, a sentiment he couldn't recall expressing in a long time. Sakusei acknowledged that the boy was unlike any of the sycophants they had encountered before, noting how he genuinely cared about their daughter's feelings by asking for her directly. I pointed out that he maintained steady eye contact throughout their conversation, never once letting his gaze wander. She wondered how someone so remarkable could have remained single for so long. They arrived at Momo's bedroom and knocked on the door, announcing their presence as her parents. Momo allowed them to enter, and they found her sitting on the edge of her bed, dressed in a white blouse adorned with black floral prints and a tan skirt that reached her ankles, complemented by high-heeled boots. Her hair flowed freely, and she had applied a touch of makeup. She inquired about the boy's answer. Her father replied that they were unaware of it. He explained that he had asked them to bring her so she could hear it directly from him, stating that she had more right to know than they did. Momo's cheeks flushed with a rosy hue upon hearing this. Her mother remarked on her ability to choose well. Momo stood and moved toward the door, expressing her desire not to keep him waiting. However, her mother gently suggested that she might want to remove her makeup and tie her hair back, believing that he might not be ready to see her with her hair down. Momo looked slightly puzzled and questioned whether her hairstyle truly mattered. Both parents nodded in agreement, emphasizing that sometimes the little things make a significant difference. Shortly after, the Yaoyorozus returned with their daughter in tow. When Momo and Izuku locked eyes again, they both blushed and instinctively looked away, which the parents found endearing. They all took their seats at the long dining table, with the Midoriyas facing the Yaoyorozus. Sakusei asked if they could finally hear Izuku's answer. The boy swallowed hard, knowing the moment had arrived, and everyone was on the edge of their seats, eager for his response. Inko thought about her trust in Izuku, feeling a wave of nervousness wash over her. Momo felt a flutter of anxiety, while I envisioned how lovely it would be to have Midoriya in the family, convinced of his answer. Sakusei considered the implications of Izuku's answer, knowing that a marriage would grant him a share of the Yaoyorozu fortune and a home in their mansion, and he felt the boy had earned it. After what felt like an eternity, Izuku finally spoke, expressing his regret that he could not marry her. The room fell into stunned silence, with everyone staring at Izuku in disbelief. Even Inko was taken aback. The Yaoyorozus were utterly baffled, unable to comprehend why he would decline such an extraordinary offer. Momo was practically a princess, and the benefits of accepting the proposal were immense. Izuku broke the silence, explaining that Momo was incredible, both inside and out. He shared how she had been the first person to treat him with kindness, and he felt that he had finally reached his dream when he saved her. Meeting her allowed him to move forward in life. He acknowledged that she had called him special, but he returned the sentiment, noting that she accepted him despite his quirklessness and welcomed him into her life. He admitted that part of him still struggled to believe that someone would want to be with him, feeling as though it was a dream he never wanted to end. His heartfelt words resonated deeply with the listeners, especially Inko and Momo, who fought to hold back their tears. Sakusei and I were astonished by the depth of his character, questioning how he had remained single for so long. However, Izuku continued, expressing that he didn't truly know Momo yet. While he recognized her as a bright, respectful, and kind-hearted person, he felt that rushing into marriage after only a few days of acquaintance was unwise. He candidly shared his concerns about their differing perspectives on marriage, noting that it seemed to be viewed as a business transaction in her world. He acknowledged the differences in their lives and the things about her that he still needed to understand. Marriage is a lifelong commitment, not something pursued for gain or profit. The Yaoyorozus contemplated Midoriya's words deeply. Momo's parents had been united in a similar fashion, yet they made the best of their marriage. They could only hope their daughter would be just as fortunate. However, the more complicated aspects of their class might have distorted their views on certain matters. It was both amusing and profoundly sad that a child had to educate them on such mature topics. Izuku expressed his feelings as he stood up from his seat, stating that he couldn't bring himself to marry someone he didn't know. However, he added that he would like to get to know her. Momo gazed at him, her eyes filled with confusion and unshed tears. As he walked around the table, he continued, expressing his desire to learn more about her, her likes, dislikes, cute habits, hobbies, and dreams. He wanted to discover what made her unique. Now standing in front of Momo, who had adjusted her chair to face him, Izuku knelt down and gently took her hand in his. A deep blush spread across her cheeks as she struggled to hold back her tears. He asked if she would be willing to accept him as her boyfriend. Inko felt overwhelmed with emotion, silently cheering for her son as she fought back tears. I, too, was filled with admiration, thinking how fortunate they were to have crossed paths with such a wonderful young man. Momo, reflecting on everything she had done since meeting Izuku, felt a wave of guilt wash over her regarding her reasons for wanting to marry him. She realized he was right about everything. She had focused too much on her own feelings and not enough on his. Wiping away a stray tear, Momo managed a shaky smile and expressed her willingness to be his girlfriend. They exchanged contact information, with Momo providing her home number and Izuku sharing his personal number. They promised to get to know each other better before discussing anything serious. As Izuku and Inko got into their car, they both let out a sigh of relief. Inko praised her son for handling the situation so well, expressing her pride. Izuku wore a tired smile as he gazed ahead, mentioning that he had taken her and Aunt Mitsuki's advice to trust his heart and stand firm. He was just grateful that everything had gone smoothly. Then he slumped into his seat, completely exhausted. Inko kissed his forehead before starting the car and driving home. Meanwhile, Momo was settling into her luxurious bed sheets, trying to fall asleep after the emotionally draining experience. However, she found herself unable to rest, her mind lingering on Izuku. Her thoughts were interrupted by her mother's voice. I asked if she was having trouble sleeping, and Momo nodded silently. They gently probed, suggesting that Momo had struck gold with the young man. Momo sat up and questioned whether she had truly made the right decision. She expressed her concerns about her motivations for proposing marriage, fearing she might be no better than others who pursued it for selfish reasons. I wrapped her daughter in a warm embrace, allowing her to cry quietly. She reassured Momo that she was nothing like those others, and that Izuku saw her as the intelligent and kind young woman she was. He had declined engagement because he wanted a lasting relationship. Momo nestled closer to her mother, whispering a muffled thank you. I then mentioned something that would ease Momo's doubts about her choice. She revealed that the check Momo had given Izuku had not affected their finances at all in the last 40 hours. With that, I kissed her daughter goodnight and left the room. Feeling a sense of relief, Momo finally believed she could rest. She closed her eyes, a small smile gracing her lips, eager to end the day on a positive note. The young heiress realized that her retreat into the realm of dreams would have to wait. Reaching for her phone on the nightstand, she noticed a new message. Her heart raced at the thought of Izuku reaching out to her. It wasn't too late, and she could understand if he was having trouble sleeping, but messaging her now? It was just one of her acquaintances inviting her on their usual shopping trip. It was challenging for her to remain loyal to them, as they sometimes engaged in activities she did not approve of. Yet, she found it difficult to decline their invitations, as they helped alleviate her loneliness at school. Before responding, she took a moment to examine the latest addition to her contact list. She politely declined the invitation, explaining that she needed some time for herself due to something important that required her full attention. She suggested rescheduling for later in the week. Her friend responded with a hint of disappointment, acknowledging that whatever was happening in Momo's life took precedence over their plans. Momo felt a pang in her heart, but brushed it aside, determined to make it up to them later. Perhaps she could introduce them to Izuku, but only as a friend for now. She sensed they both preferred to keep their relationship private until they felt more comfortable. With that conversation concluded, she turned her attention to Midoriya's contact. A bead of sweat formed on her forehead as warmth spread across her cheeks. She sighed, questioning her own thoughts and actions. Meanwhile, Izuku lay asleep on his bed, still dressed except for his shoes. His mother had carried him upstairs after a long day, and though it was a strenuous task, she felt it was the least she could do for her son after the mental strain he had endured. Suddenly, he stirred awake as his phone vibrated against his chest. Groggily, he retrieved it from his jacket and blinked at the bright screen, noticing a new message from Yaoyorozu. Instantly alert, he felt a rush of excitement. His hands trembled as he tapped the notification, but then he hesitated, closing his eyes for a moment. Gathering his courage, he opened them again to read her message. She apologized for messaging him at such a late hour, expressing her interest in getting to know him better, and suggesting they meet up sometime. Izuku's face flushed with various shades of red as he processed her words. It felt like she was asking him out, and he recalled his own desire to be her boyfriend. Shaking his head to clear his thoughts, he quickly typed a response, asking if she had a specific date and time in mind. Momo found herself giggling at his nervousness as she read his message. She proposed meeting the following day, explaining that she was taking the day off to gather her thoughts. Izuku felt a rush of anxiety at her eagerness, but quickly reassured her that it was not a problem. He suggested a casual location where they could talk comfortably among others. She confirmed that he could choose the location, and he insisted he wanted to contribute to the planning as well. They agreed to finalize the details in the morning. Izuku reassured her that he would do everything again if necessary, and she could sense the sincerity in his words. They exchanged goodnight wishes, and as Izuku set his phone down, he stared at the ceiling, exhilarated by the prospect of spending time with the girl he admired. The following Monday morning marked a bright start for Izuku Midoriya, who woke up at 10 a.m. stretching his stiff limbs. He yawned deeply, trying to shake off the remnants of sleep. At least he didn't have to worry about Bedhead with his messy green hair. Soon, the door opened, and Inko entered with a tray of breakfast and a cup of iced tea. She greeted her son warmly, and he returned the greeting with a smile. Sitting up straight, he inhaled the delightful aroma of his mother's cooking and began to enjoy his meal in bed. As he ate, Inko noticed that her son appeared unusually calm, which was a welcome change given the events of the past few days. She asked him if he had checked the time. He paused, putting down his chopsticks, and reached for his phone to check the digital clock on the screen. His eyes widened in shock, and he nearly choked. It was 10:05 a.m. He had slept in late. Inko reassured him, explaining that she had called the school to inform them he was sick. She thought he could use a day to relax, especially since it was the last week of school. After taking a few large gulps of cold tea, Izuku smiled at his mother, feeling grateful for her understanding. With that, she left him to enjoy his meal in peace. Just as Izuku was finishing his plate, his phone vibrated. A message from Yaoyorozu appeared on the screen, wishing him a good morning and asking how he was doing. He nearly spit out his food in surprise, but managed to swallow it down with more tea. It seemed like one of those days when he thought he could relax, only for something unexpected to come up. He wondered about the saying, "No rest for the weary," he replied, greeting her back and asking how her morning was. She responded that her morning was very nice, mentioning that she had enjoyed breakfast and decided not to attend school that day, hinting that he might know the reason. He quickly typed back, expressing that he understood, as he had just woken up a few minutes ago. Her laughter came through in her next message, and he felt a rush of emotions. Was she laughing at him or finding him amusing? He couldn't tell. But then she typed again, asking if he had any ideas on how to spend their unexpected free time. Izuku froze for a moment, staring at her words. He felt a surge of panic as he realized he had completely forgotten that he had promised to choose a place for them to meet. He grabbed his pillow and let out a muffled scream before setting it aside, revealing his distressed expression. He felt like he was already failing at being a boyfriend on their first day. He racked his brain for a suitable location, dismissing the idea of his room, which resembled an all-night museum. He needed to clean it up anyway. As he glanced around for inspiration, his eyes landed on his tray of dirty dishes. A restaurant felt too much like a formal date, but then he noticed his nearly finished iced tea and had an idea. He quickly typed out a suggestion for a tea cafe that afternoon, hoping it would be a good choice. To his relief, Yaoyorozu responded enthusiastically, saying she would love to join him for tea. He laid back on his bed, clutching his racing heart, grateful that his idea worked. He suggested a time of 2:30 p.m., and she confirmed it was perfect, offering to pick him up. He declined her offer, assuring her it was just a short walk for him. She expressed her excitement, and he replied with a simple confirmation, feeling a mix of disbelief and joy at having had a conversation with a girl, even if it was through text. After washing the dishes, brushing his teeth, and taking a shower, Izuku found himself with just under 4 hours to prepare for his meeting with Momo. His mother had left for work, leaving him to get ready on his own. He reminded himself that it wasn't a fancy dinner date, just a casual meetup. He needed to find something appropriate to wear, avoiding anything too lazy. After searching through his wardrobe, he finally put together a suitable outfit. As he finished getting dressed, he looked at himself in the mirror. On the outside, he appeared composed, but inside he felt a whirlwind of emotions. He was going out with a girl, and his mother had no idea. He wondered what Momo liked and worried about his tendency to ramble. What if she thought he was creepy? He had never hung out with a girl before, and she seemed so collected and focused. Surely, she wasn't nervous at all. Yaoyorozu Mansion Momo sat in front of her vanity, practicing deep breathing exercises to calm her nerves. She felt lightheaded and groaned softly to herself, reminding herself that this meeting was just a chance to learn more about each other, as he had suggested. She reassured herself that she had spoken to boys before, so she could handle this. Looking at her reflection in the full-length mirror, she sighed, contemplating her appearance. She recalled her mother's comment about the check she had given him. Did he think it was out of pity? He must have noticed the differences in their lifestyles, and she worried he might see it as her flaunting her wealth. Yet, she couldn't simply take the check back. Frustrated, she groaned again, wishing it weren't so complicated. Overthinking would only stress her out further. She needed to focus on making a better impression this time. Later, the moment arrived. Izuku stood at a table outside the entrance of the cafe where they were meeting. Sweat trickled down his forehead, not entirely due to the afternoon heat. He was about to have what felt like a date with someone he considered angelic. He wondered if he should order for them to enjoy the cafe sooner, but worried it might be rude to assume what she wanted. He questioned whether he smelled good, having taken a quick shower and used deodorant. Was that too much? Unbeknownst to him, he was voicing every insecurity in his mind. Just as he was about to spiral into a mumbling fit, a sleek, expensive-looking Lamborghini pulled up, catching his attention. He did a double take at the vehicle and had to stop himself from staring when a stunning young lady emerged from the back seat. Momo greeted him nervously, and Izuku was momentarily speechless, captivated by her beauty. He quickly collected himself after noticing her blush and complimented her outfit, stuttering with embarrassment. She thanked him and returned the compliment, suggesting they sit down. Acting on a dating tip he had read, Izuku pulled out a chair for her. She smiled, indicating it was a good move. Once seated, they were enveloped in a thick silence, their eyes darting everywhere except towards each other. Someone needed to break the ice. Fortunately, the waiter arrived, asking if they were ready to order. Izuku ordered a raspberry iced tea and vanilla scones, and Momo chose the same drink but with strawberry and vanilla ice cream-filled mochi. The waiter left them alone again, returning them to their awkward silence. Momo initiated conversation, asking if his walk had been okay. He responded that it had been a good walk, with hardly anyone around, which allowed him to gather his thoughts. She nodded, pleased. Izuku then inquired if she often visited the cafe. Momo glanced at the Lamborghini, explaining that she didn't want to draw too much attention. Izuku was slightly surprised. He thought this was subtle for her. Momo asked if he came to the cafe often, to which he admitted he rarely did, feeling he wasn't very sociable. His attempt at laughter masked his sadness, and Momo felt a pang of regret for reminding him of his lack of friends. Izuku then asked if she did outings like this with her friends. She replied that while they did, it was rare for them to enjoy calm outings. Most of their time was spent shopping and sightseeing in her family's cars, which was fun but didn't often include activities she enjoyed. Izuku looked into her eyes for the first time that day, noticing a hint of sadness as she spoke about her friends. He thought about how it seemed they only used her for her wealth. He sighed, reflecting on his own lack of friends since kindergarten. Despite that, he felt a connection with her, understanding the loneliness behind her smile. Momo expressed her appreciation for her friends, noting how they kept her company at school and invited her to fun activities. Izuku had his reservations but chose to remain silent. He inquired about her interests, to which she enthusiastically replied that she enjoyed reading, playing the piano, participating in group study sessions, and drinking tea. Although he was curious about how often she engaged in those activities with her friends, he refrained from asking. He then asked her about her favorite type of tea. Momo explained that it was hard to choose just one because there were so many varieties, each with unique benefits. She mentioned ginger tea for nausea, lemon balm for stress relief, and chamomile for insomnia. As she passionately described the different teas and their effects, Izuku couldn't help but smile at her infectious enthusiasm. Eventually, Momo realized she had been talking a lot and blushed, apologizing for getting carried away. Izuku reassured her that it was perfectly fine and even found her excitement cute, though he muttered it under his breath. Momo noticed and felt her blush deepen as she looked at him, while Izuku's cheeks reddened in response. Just then, the waiter returned with their drinks and snacks. They both took refreshing gulps of iced raspberry tea to cool the warmth in their faces. Momomo then asked Izuku about his interests. He hesitated, unsure if he should reveal his nerdy obsession with quirks, but felt it was only fair to share after listening to her. He admitted that he didn't have many hobbies, but he was fascinated by heroes and their quirks. He explained how he loved to analyze them whenever he encountered a remarkable one. As he took a bite of his scone, Momo could easily guess this from his notebook, which was filled with detailed notes on various heroes' quirks, including their strengths and weaknesses. Izuku shared that one of his favorite heroes was All Might, but he had a particular admiration for those with challenging quirks, like Edgeshot and Best Geniest. He explained that while their powers might seem straightforward, they required immense effort to master. They might not be the flashiest, but they were incredibly effective, showcasing their strength even in tough situations. Momo, blushing, thought about how he appreciated difficult quirks. She asked him if he wanted to know about her quirk, and his eyes widened in surprise, clearly eager to learn. She took a deep breath and began to explain. Her quirk, she revealed, was called creation, allowing her to generate any non-living object from her body. To do this, she needed to know the molecular structure of the object, which would then manifest on her skin. She demonstrated by creating a small Russian nesting doll and handing it to him, feeling shy as she looked down at her food. Izuku was taken aback by her ability, exclaiming how incredible it was. He praised her for the versatility of her quirk, noting the complexity of memorizing various formulas and structures. He admired how she made it look effortless, expressing that she had an amazing power that could enable her to achieve anything she desired. Momo was surprised by his enthusiastic response, realizing he was genuinely impressed. As he placed the doll down, he began to explain the intricacies of her quirk, discussing the focus required to visualize molecular structures and the challenges of creating larger objects. He speculated about the energy source needed for her quirk, concluding that it must involve fat cells, which would explain her impressive physique despite needing to eat more than average. Momo smiled widely, feeling a mix of admiration and joy as Izuku continued to analyze her quirk with such insight. She was genuinely impressed by his ability to deduce so much from their conversation, recognizing his sharp intellect. Izuku finally fell silent, hiding his flushed face behind his arms. He felt embarrassed for getting a bit too enthusiastic. Momo reassured him, expressing that it was perfectly normal to have passions, reminding him that he had never called her strange for her love of tea. Her genuine smile brought Izuku a sense of tranquility. Before they realized it, their drinks and plates were empty, signaling that it was time to say goodbye. Izuku was astonished to see that an entire hour had passed. Momo shared his surprise, feeling as if time had flown by. He walked her to her Lamborghini, where her driver waited patiently. The driver had occasionally stepped away to explore nearby shops. Feeling a surge of courage, Izuku expressed how much he enjoyed their time together. Momo's eyes widened in delight as she agreed, suggesting they meet again sometime. Izuku felt elated at the prospect, eagerly agreeing to the idea. As Momo opened the door to her vehicle, she recalled Izuku pretending to take notes during their conversation. She caught his attention before he could leave, mentioning how he had mimicked writing about her quirk. Izuku blushed, scratching the back of his head, explaining that it was a habit of his to jot down thoughts on his hand when he didn't have a notebook. Embarrassment washed over him as he remembered the unfortunate incident with his burned notebook. Momo, sensing his discomfort, asked if it was challenging to write in a damaged notebook. Izuku admitted he hadn't tried, fearing the pages would fall apart if he pressed too hard. Then Momo presented him with a new notebook, its red cover adorned with his name. Izuku was taken aback. She was giving him a gift after such a wonderful day. He hesitated, insisting that he could easily buy a new one. Momo struggled to find the right words, explaining that hearing him praise her quirk inspired her to give him this gift. She urged him to accept it. Izuku felt a rush of emotion, nearly overwhelmed by her kindness. With trembling hands, he accepted the notebook, promising to treasure it and use it well. Momo could see the joy in his eyes as she thanked him for the lovely time before climbing into her vehicle. He returned her sentiment, and she waved goodbye as her driver started the engine. As she drove away, Izuku fell baltic onto the pavement, a wide smile on his face, tears of joy escaping him. It was the best day ever. Meanwhile, Katsuki was having a very different experience. He grumbled to himself as he stomped down the street, frustrated by a day spent at school with little to show for it. He had hoped to confront Izuku and settle the score for the punch he received, but to his annoyance, the nerd was nowhere to be found. Instead, he could have spent the day with his friends, causing mischief around town. Katsuki's anger boiled as he thought about Izuku. Just then, he collided with someone and quickly realized it was the very person he had been searching for. Izuku was engrossed in writing in a brand new notebook, a goofy grin on his face. Katsuki growled as he approached him. Oblivious to Katsuki's presence, Izuku continued writing, documenting everything he had learned about Momo. The sight of Izuku's happiness felt like a thorn in Katsuki's side. He demanded to know where Izuku had been, reminding him that he wouldn't forget the cheap shot he had taken. Izuku, lost in his thoughts, ignored Katsuki and walked past him, mumbling about Momo's insights on non-living materials. Katsuki sees frustration peaked as he shouted at Izuku, demanding his attention. Izuku remained absorbed in his notes, reflecting on Momo's interests and the details of their conversation, unaware of the storm brewing behind him. Katsuki's anger reached a boiling point as he threatened Izuku, ready to confront him for the perceived slight. Izuku, his thoughts still consumed by Momo and the enjoyable day they had shared, finally noticed the shouting blonde behind him. He dismissed Katsuki's outburst, stating that it wasn't the right time. Izuku hurried back to his apartment not out of fear, but because he was focused on his own thoughts. Katsuki stood there taken aback. Deku was not afraid of him at all. He had completely ignored him, as if he had forgotten who he was. But what could have caused this change? Katsuki's mind raced as he recalled the events. First, the punch to the nose, and now this. The blonde clenched his teeth and tightened his fists, smoke beginning to rise from them. Whoever this girl was, he was determined to find out what was going on. Frustrated, Katsuki yelled from the shower, his anger boiling over. It had taken him all night to process what had happened the previous day. That annoying brat had dared to ignore him. Mitsuki's voice rang out from downstairs, telling him to stop yelling so early in the day. Suddenly, it hit him. His mother was in on it. Without hesitation, he stormed into the kitchen where Masaru was making breakfast and Mitsuki was casually eating a banana. He demanded to know who Deku was dating. Mitsuki shouted back, reminding him to lower his voice. Katsuki insisted that if Izuku had spoken to her, then he deserved to know who was spending time with him. Mitsuki swiftly reprimanded her son, stating that it was none of their business. She had only learned about Izuku's first date from Inko. Katsuki's anger flared as he realized the implications of what he had just heard. The two of them continued to argue throughout the morning, their voices rising in volume. Masaru simply wore earplugs, finding the noise somewhat bearable. Meanwhile, at Manabu Private Academy, a school renowned for its excellence, Momo Yaoyorozu was reviewing her notes from previous classes. As lunch hour began, her thoughts shifted to a different topic. She pulled out her phone and sent a message. She received a quick reply. Curious about how his day was going, she typed another message, but was interrupted by the arrival of 3 classmates. A pink-haired girl with green eyes and silver scales, a blonde girl with blue eyes and a long ponytail, and a black-haired boy with spiky hair approached her. They excitedly discussed their plans for summer break, suggesting shopping for new swimsuits and season passes to the water park. Momo smiled, happy to see her friends excited, though she felt a bit out of place. With the end of the term approaching, spirits were high, and they clearly wanted her to be part of their plans. Suddenly, her phone pinged with a message from Izuku, and she realized she had left him waiting for a response. She quickly typed back. One of her friends, Oase, inquired about who she was texting. Momo explained that it was just a friend, which was partially true. Their outing 2 days ago could be seen as friendly, but it also hinted at something more. She suggested inviting him on their mall trip at the end of the week, noting that he was very nice and that her friends would likely enjoy meeting him. Akurui and Jiga exchanged knowing smiles, eager to meet this new friend. Oase, however, felt a twinge of jealousy at the thought of Momo's excitement over this boy. He reluctantly agreed to the idea. As the bell rang, signaling the end of lunch, Momo continued her conversation with Izuku. She asked if he had any plans for the summer, curious about what he might be up to. Yaoyorozu shared with her friends that they had made plans to meet up at Kiyashi Ward Shopping Mall the day after the final bell. She invited Midoriya to join them, assuring him that her friends would like him. However, Izuku felt uncertain about whether they would be the kind of friends he would appreciate. Despite his reservations, Izuku agreed to go, feeling a mix of excitement and anxiety about meeting new people and potentially deepening his relationship with Momo. As he prepared to leave, his mother Inko expressed her surprise at his plans, teasing him about going on 2 dates in 1 week. Izuku quickly clarified that it was not a date but merely an introduction to her friends, though he questioned his own thoughts on the matter. The train ride was peaceful, with a comfortable atmosphere that allowed Izuku to reflect. He pondered Yaoyorozu's friendships, considering her tendency to engage with those who seemed to only value her for her wealth. He wondered if she had ever experienced a genuine friendship outside her family, but he reminded himself not to jump to conclusions and decided to see how the day unfolded. Upon arriving at the bustling Kiyashi Ward shopping mall, Izuku spotted Momo with her distinctive black hair. He greeted her shyly, and she expressed her happiness that he had come. However, her friends did not seem as enthusiastic about his presence. Momo introduced her friends, Jiga, who had a unique appearance and greeted him with a smile, Akarui, whose bright smile nearly blinded him, and Awase, who managed a forced smile. Izuku felt nervous but hoped to make a good impression. Momo led the group as they discussed their shopping needs. Izuku mentioned he only needed bug spray and sun protection, while Akaruis excitedly listed her shopping list, which included a swimsuit and sundress. Jiga playfully teased her about her glowing skin, and Awase mentioned needing new swim trunks. They headed to a store filled with swimwear and accessories. As Izuku searched for sunscreen and sandals, he overheard Momo's uncertain voice. Turning the corner, he saw Jiga playfully pushing a red bikini into Momo's hands. This sight sent Izuku's mind racing with thoughts he quickly tried to suppress, reminding himself to focus on anything but that. Awase, meanwhile, noticed Izuku's flustered reaction and couldn't help but feel a pang of jealousy. Later, as the group wandered through the mall, they stumbled upon a bookstore. Momo expressed her desire to buy a certain book, but her friends groaned, feeling it was too early in summer for such a choice. Momo felt a twinge of shame for not considering her friends' feelings. Izuku, wanting to support Momo, volunteered to go with her, claiming he needed something to read. Momo's mood lifted instantly, and she excitedly pulled him into the store, while Jiga and Akarui exchanged amused glances at the duo's enthusiasm. Awase, feeling a mix of emotions, tried to suppress his jealousy as he watched them. Izuku inquired about what Momo was searching for, to which she replied that she was looking for a book on using weapons in combat. Concern filled his eyes as he listened to her explain that after feeling helpless, she wanted to improve herself. She expressed that if she was going to be a hero, she needed to be capable of taking care of herself. His eyes widened as this revelation checked off the dreams box on his list of getting to know her. After selecting his own book, he stood beside her and confidently stated that he believed she would become a top-tier hero. He recognized her incredible potential and assured her that with her hard work and determination, she could achieve her goals. His smile conveyed unwavering support. Momo felt a rush of warmth inside, touched by his words. Izuku's kind encouragement brought tears to her eyes, and she tried to stifle her sniffles. Initially, he worried he had upset her, but her gratitude reassured him. After collecting themselves, they approached the counter. Momo asked which book he had chosen, and Izuku revealed a book on martial arts. He admitted that he too felt inadequate. Both of them felt their cheeks warm as they placed their books on the counter. Once the clerk signaled them to proceed, they hurriedly exited the store. Jiga commented on the thickness of their books and inquired about the cost. Izuku suddenly felt a wave of panic wash over him as he realized he had left the store without paying. Confusion set in when he wondered why the clerk had let him leave. Momo answered that each book cost 8,000 yen, causing Izuku to pale even more. He realized that Momo had paid for his book. He protested, insisting she didn't have to do that, but she reassured him that it was a small gesture to support his desire to improve. Despite her kindness, Izuku remained hesitant about accepting the gift, while Jiga and Akarui seemed indifferent, and Awase was visibly upset. Later, the group wandered through the mall, searching for items they needed or wanted. Eventually, they reached a crossroads. Momo spotted a poster for a live ice skating show scheduled from 1 p.m. to 2 p.m., while Jiga and Akarui noticed a Gucci store next to a Chanel store. Momo understood that her friends likely wouldn't want to join her for the show, which disappointed her, as she knew it wouldn't be as enjoyable alone. Awais eagerly volunteered to accompany Momo, excited about the opportunity to spend time with her. Izuku suggested they split up and reconvene in an hour, a reasonable compromise, though he was still undecided about which group to join or if he would venture off alone. Momo asked Izuku if he had ever seen ice skating before, to which he admitted he hadn't. Her next question made his heart race and ignited jealousy in Awais. She invited him to join them, and he agreed with a shaky smile. The three of them approached the ticket stand, with Momo blissfully unaware of Oasis' simmering frustration directed at Izuku. Momo ordered 3 tickets, but just before she could pay, Izuku protested, concerned that it was too much for her to cover. Awais, with a sharp tone, dismissed Izuku's worries, making him shrink back. Izuku felt guilty, thinking Momo was giving too much. Momo reassured him that she simply wanted to ensure he enjoyed himself, and her sincerity tugged at his heart. He hesitantly agreed, and the tickets were handed to them as they made their way to the seating area. They settled into their seats, with Izuku on Momo's left and Awais on her right. The show commenced with lights dimming and spotlights illuminating the ice rink. A duo of ice skaters glided gracefully across the surface, their movements mesmerizing the audience. Izuku and Momo were captivated, perched on the edge of their seats, relishing the performance. For Izuku, it was a cherished memory of trying something new with someone he enjoyed. For Momo, it was a delight to finally have a companion for an activity she loved. As for Awais, he found himself drifting off to sleep. An hour later, Izuku exclaimed how incredible the performance was, marveling at the fluidity of the skaters' movements. Momo giggled at his enthusiasm, recalling how dizzy she felt just watching them. Awais lagged behind, rubbing the sleep from his eyes. Unfortunately, the sight before him made him wish he had stayed asleep. Izuku and Momo were blushing and gushing over each other, seemingly oblivious to the world around them. Though he wanted to intervene, he hesitated, knowing it would only make him appear selfish. Jiga called out to the group as she and Akarui approached, both carrying large bags. Izuku couldn't help but think they must really get a good workout from all the shopping. Akarui handed Momo a black card adorned with gold writing, prompting Izuku to wonder if it was her credit card. Before he could voice his thoughts, the sound of growling stomachs filled the air. Akarui suggested going for lunch at their usual spot. Initially, Izuku assumed they were heading to the food court, but they surprised him by taking him to a high-class restaurant in the mall, La Nourriture des Riches Restaurant. As they entered, Izuku felt a wave of disbelief wash over him. The carpets were a royal red, dim ceiling lights illuminated the space, and candlelit tables created an elegant atmosphere. A pianist played a soothing melody, and stepping inside made Izuku acutely aware of his own financial situation. Momo, however, remained unfazed, accustomed to such surroundings. Izuku expressed his discomfort, feeling out of place. Awais thought he should just leave if he felt that way. Jiga reassured him that he would get used to it. When the waiter presented the menus, Izuku nearly had a heart attack at the outrageous prices. Did they serve food on golden plates? The others ordered without hesitation. Momo chose salmon, Awais opted for steak and potato skin, Akarui selected mapo tofu, and Jiga went for gourmet ramen. Izuku settled on a relatively affordable bowl of katsudon. He knew his wallet would feel the pinch later. As their meals arrived, the conversation resumed. Jiga shared her vacation aspirations, mentioning her desire to try snorkeling or swim with dolphins. Mo chimed in, explaining that she would have limited free time due to weaponry lessons for self-defense. Izuku looked at her with understanding, acknowledging the importance of being prepared for any situation. Akarui suggested hiring bodyguards, but Momo insisted on being able to stand on her own. Izuku smiled, revealing that he was also taking up martial arts for self-defense. Momo returned his smile, agreeing that it was wise to start training early to avoid disappointing UA. Izuku nearly choked on his food upon realizing she was planning to attend UA, the top hero school in the country. Awais quickly added that they were both going to UA. He mentioned that while he would take the standard tests, Momo had a practically guaranteed seat due to her parents' contributions. Momo appeared slightly disheartened by his words, prompting her to ask about Izuku's quirk. Izuku shared that his quirk was called Weld, allowing him to fuse objects at a molecular level. He demonstrated by fusing a fork to a napkin, which Izuku found impossible to separate. Awase felt a flicker of kindness toward the greenette, impressed by his ability. He asked if Izuku was interested in attending UA as well. Izuku's and Momo's expressions shifted. With a small smile, Izuku admitted he didn't think he would be fit for such a school. His chuckle carried a hint of sadness, which tugged at Momo's heart. Jiga inquired about his quirk, and Izuku felt the urge to lie or evade the question, but he knew that wouldn't end well. He decided to be honest. He revealed that he was quirkless. Instead of mockery, he was met with pity. While it wasn't the best feeling, it was certainly better than the cruelty he had faced at Aldera. Still, he sensed that his revelation had slightly damaged the bond he was building with Momo's friends. He hoped it was just a fleeting assumption. Awase felt a twinge of sympathy for Izuku, thinking that at least he didn't have to worry about competition for Momo's affections. Jiga found herself disappointed, realizing he was even duller than she had thought. Akarui concluded that it made sense for him to learn to fight since he lacked any powers. Once their meal was finished, it was time to settle the bill. Izuku insisted on covering his own meal first. Momo interjected, stating she could easily pay for everyone. However, Izuku, with a surprisingly firm tone, insisted that she had already covered his book and ice skating ticket, and he felt guilty for taking so much from her. Momo was genuinely touched. It was the first time anyone had refused her offer to pay. Her friends, however, felt uneasy about his selfless attitude, as it made them appear less generous. It was all right. Momo had likely spent the least amount that day, so she still had some savings left. She could handle it. After seeing the pleading look in Izuku's eyes and hearing his earnest tone, she found it impossible to decline his request. Although it would take a significant portion of his savings, she felt it was manageable. After lunch, it seemed like a good time to wrap things up. As the group of 5 made their way toward the exit, Midoriya suddenly halted, captivated by something that caught his eye. Momo was the only one who noticed his pause and turned to look in the same direction. In the window of a furniture store, they spotted a large wooden piano. Midoriya's voice broke the silence as he mentioned Momo's piano skills. Momo felt a blush creep onto her cheeks, surprised that Midoriya remembered such a small detail about her. She quickly realized what he was implying. She hesitated, saying she could play since it wasn't too crowded, but Izuku interrupted her, his face turning red. He clarified that he would be honored if she played for him, but not right there. Momo's cheeks flushed even more as she realized her misunderstanding. Izuku partially hid his face with his arms, feeling embarrassed for not being clearer. They both stood in an awkward silence for a moment before hastily making their way to the exit. The rest of their friends had already left, leaving just the 2 of them and a few stragglers packing up. They both pulled out their phones for different reasons. Momo was calling her driver while Izuku checked the time, noting it was 2:40 p.m. He thought about how long it would take for the next train to arrive. Suddenly, Momo asked how long until his train would come, pulling him from his thoughts. He stammered out that it would be 20 minutes. Momo's driver would arrive in 5 minutes, which gave her just enough time to gather her courage to ask him if he wanted a ride home. Izuku was taken aback by her offer, insisting that he was fine waiting for another 15 minutes. Momo, however, expressed her concern about the subway being dangerous, even during the day, and said she would feel better knowing he got home safely. Izuku's heart fluttered at her genuine care for him. After taking a deep breath, he thanked her, giving her a smile that made her stomach flutter. The ride back to Musutafu was nearly 30 minutes long, and during that time, they sat together in an atmosphere thick with awkwardness. Momo wondered if she had made the right choice. Instead of making Izuku feel comfortable, they were both feeling the weight of the silence. Perhaps he would have preferred the train after all. Izuku broke the silence, asking about her friends. Momo spoke about how nice they were and how much fun she had that day. But she sensed the but coming. She admitted that while they were enjoyable, they seemed somewhat self-absorbed. She quickly clarified that she wasn't saying they were bad people, just that they didn't quite understand her like Izuku did. Momo's cheeks turned a deep shade of red as she confessed that it was more enjoyable when it was just the two of them. Izuku felt his face heat up at her words. The car ride came to an end as they arrived at Izuku's apartment building. He thanked her for the ride, bowing slightly. Momo returned the sentiment, expressing gratitude for the wonderful day they had shared. Just as Izuku turned to enter the building, Momo called out to him again. She promised to practice her piano skills whenever he wanted to hear her play. Izuku felt a rush of warmth at the reminder of their earlier conversation. He waved goodbye and stepped inside, leaving Momo with plenty to ponder. That night, Momo sat on her bed in her pale rose nightgown, brushing her hair while reflecting on the day. She couldn't help but compare the differences between her friends and Midoriya. While her friends often took her out for activities, they rarely engaged in meaningful conversations. In contrast, Izuku made an effort to truly get to know her, showing genuine interest in her as a person. When she wanted to do something, he decided to join her, making the experience even more special. With her friends, Momo often felt like she was dragging them along rather than sharing genuine moments. Regarding finances, both Izuku and her friends were aware of her family's wealth, but Izuku never took advantage of it. He even refused to cash a check that had been given to him, asking Momo to stop spending money on him because it made him feel guilty. Her friends, however, never shared that sentiment. They were always eager to accept her generosity. With this in mind, the heiress struggled to reconcile how her friends perceived her. She pulled out her phone and scrolled to a number she had come to know well. Midoriya changed to Izuku. It had been 2 weeks since Izuku received his new martial arts book. He was currently at Dagobah Beach, practicing his melee attacks on a training dummy he had constructed from torn cushions and car seats. Training in his small apartment was not ideal, so he chose this location to ensure he could focus without interruptions. Before starting his training, Izuku decided to clean up part of the beach as a way of earning the right to use it as his personal training ground. He wasn't arrogant enough to claim ownership of the area. Over 10 days, he cleared a space to practice his moves and created a pathway to run along the sand. After finishing his workout with the makeshift punching bag, he took a refreshing swim in the water. Despite the litter scattered around, it was an excellent place for him to train in peace. Some days, he found the energy to tidy up a bit after his workouts. After another day of intense training, Deku picked up his duffel bag and walked home, feeling a sense of accomplishment and a hint of pride. His phone buzzed in his pocket, revealing a new message from Momo. They were on a first-name basis now. Momo: hello Izuku, are you busy? Izuku: no, I just finished a workout. What's up, Momo? Momo: if you can make time tomorrow, would you please come to my home? I have an idea I would like to share with you. Izuku froze at the word idea. He had completely forgotten about Momo's earlier wish to marry him. He was so caught up in enjoying their relationship that the thought of marriage had slipped to the back of his mind. It wasn't that he didn't want to marry her. He was simply savoring the moment. Izuku: Sure, no problem. See you tomorrow, wonderful. I'm sure what I have to say will benefit you as well. There it was again, that businesslike tone. He began to feel nervous, as if it were a proposal all over again. They had grown close quickly, yet they hadn't even officially agreed to be partners. These thoughts swirled in his mind, consuming his attention, so he didn't notice when he bumped into someone until it was too late. He heard a voice exclaim, "Hey, watch where you're well. Look who it is." To Izuku's dismay, he had collided with Katsuki's friends, one with long dirt blonde hair and the other with short black hair. You know, you've got some serious guts walking around so casually. He must have a death wish or something. Out of instinct, Izuku took a step back. He greeted them awkwardly, feeling nervous. The two bullies advanced, cornering the green-haired teen. The black-haired one noticed something peeking out from the corner of Izuku's duffel bag. Got a new diary, huh? Izuku's eyes followed his gaze and landed on the notebook Momo had made for him, his favorite notebook. Before he could respond, the dirt blonde used his quirk to snatch it right out of the bag. Hey, give that back! Izuku reached for his prized possession, but the black-haired one held him back. The dirt blonde flipped through the pages until he found something that made him burst out laughing. Ha ha ha! Katsuki said you were simping, but this is even better than I thought. Don't look at that, Izuku exclaimed, his face turning beet red. Dude, let me see, the one holding Izuku back urged. The dirt blonde tossed the notebook to him while shoving Izuku to the ground. You creep, this is pathetic. They were looking at a hand-drawn portrait of Momo, complete with notes about what he admired and learned about her. While he still analyzed her quirk and others, he had clearly put the most effort into her pages. How long had he been following her to gather all that information? The two bullies laughed loudly at the embarrassed boy, one of them pulling out a phone to take a picture. They joked about how he even took notes on girls, pushing him to his limit. Without a second thought, Izuku lunged for his red notebook and knocked the phone from the bully's hand. It landed on a nearby garbage can, the screen cracking upon impact. The bullies, now furious, closed in on him, one of them drawing back his fist. Izuku quickly caught the fist, twisting his body to turn his back to the attacker. Using the momentum, he threw the bully into his companion, sending them both crashing into the garbage can, covered in filth. His instinct was to escape while the adrenaline was still pumping. The bullies were left on the ground, stunned and in pain from the unexpected turn of events. One of them wondered if he really had just done that, while the other relieved that their friend Katsuki wasn't there. They decided to leave out this incident when recounting the day's events. Meanwhile, Izuku sprinted toward his apartment, his legs moving swiftly. He reached the front door, swung it open, and dashed to his room, slamming the door behind him. He tossed his bag to the floor, collapsed onto his bed, and hugged his notebook tightly to his chest, trying to catch his breath and process what had just occurred. He had fought back. The training was already showing results, but he had hurt them. Still, it was self-defense. They had started it. Yet, he had bumped into them first, so perhaps he had initiated it. He had stood up for himself. Katsuki would be furious, but it felt good to finally push back against them. Suddenly, Izuku shouted to no one that he needed to do crunches to release his adrenaline. He positioned himself on the wooden floor of his bedroom and began his workout. His room had transformed significantly. What was once a shrine to All Might now resembled a typical hero-adoring teenager's space. While All Might merchandise and posters still adorned the walls, they were fewer in number. He had cleared out much of it, replacing it with posters of Edgeshot and Gunhead, along with some dumbbells and a grip trainer, as he had taken up physical exercise and combat training. After sweating out his stress, he lay back on his bed, his hand resting against his forehead. Despite the progress he had made over the summer, insecurities and self-doubt plagued him. He knew Katsuki's friends would likely share what had happened, and he doubted he could handle a 3-on-1 situation. The taunts and insults echoed in his mind. He was somewhat relieved that his mother was at work, as there were many cases of heat stroke and sun poisoning. Standing up, he grabbed his favorite notebook and walked to the railing outside his front door. He muttered to himself that he was no longer the same Deku. Despite his efforts, he couldn't feel proud of his actions. It had been a moment of adrenaline, and they had been caught off guard. In a real fight, he would probably still lose. Though these thoughts were unhealthy, they motivated him to train harder. The next day, Momo waited in her home's training room, a space with wooden flooring adorned with hand-to-hand weapons like bow staffs and wooden swords. This room had been designated for her to focus on training her body and quirk, with private tutors available on other days. Today marked her first sparring match with Izuku. While he lacked experience with weapons, his hand-to-hand combat skills would compensate for that. They would serve as each other's instructors and sparring partners. The sound of the doorbell rang, capturing her attention. Excitement filled her as she realized he had arrived. She greeted him with a bow, which might have seemed unusual to Izuku, especially given her attire. Momo stood barefoot in a snow-white gi, a red belt cinching her waist. The warm weather had left the top of her gi wide open, giving him an unexpected view. She welcomed him with enthusiasm, expressing her happiness that he could come. Izuku, blushing, thanked her and asked if she had called him over for training. Momo instructed him to remove his shoes and follow her. Obeying her, Izuku entered her in-house dojo, secretly admiring everything he saw. Momo explained the purpose of their meeting, and Izuku felt a surge of enthusiasm as he expressed his eagerness to learn how to use weapons. Momo, in turn, was excited to improve her hand-to-hand combat skills. She picked up a pair of bow staffs, and they took their positions. As they began to clash their wooden weapons, Izuku showcased his adaptability, but he struggled against Momo's superior skill. She swiftly struck the back of his leg, causing him to kneel, and followed up with a hit to his chest, sending him to the ground. Momo placed her foot on his chest to keep him pinned, holding the end of her staff just under his chin. She asked if he would surrender, fully expecting his response. Izuku found himself momentarily distracted by how impressive Momo looked while standing over him. After a brief pause, he nodded in agreement. Momo extended her hand to help him up, complimenting him on his performance. For a beginner, he had held his own quite well. Izuku blushed and rubbed the back of his head, thanking her and asking what they should do next. Momo put away the bow staffs and picked up the bladed staffs, causing Izuku to gulp, regretting his earlier question. Their next match unfolded similarly to the first. Whenever Izuku thought he had the advantage, Momo would surprise him, forcing him back into a defensive position. She had him cornered, her blade hovering dangerously close to his neck, and once again he found her presence captivating. Momo praised him for his improvement as she moved her weapon away. Izuku expressed his hope to get better, admiring her skills and comparing her to a ninja. Momo blushed at the compliment, humbly acknowledging that she still had much to learn. She handed him a bottle of water, and they took a moment to catch their breath. Now it was time for Izuku to showcase his strengths. They resumed their stances and began to fight. This time, Izuku gained the upper hand, using his legs more effectively than before. He caught Momo by the wrist, twisting her arm behind her back and bringing her down onto the carpet. The next round proved to be even more dynamic. Momo found herself overwhelmed by Izuku's swift movements. He drew her in with a feigned sweep, and when she attempted to punch him, he caught her fist. In a swift motion, he turned his back to her and lifted her off the ground, flipping her down onto the mat. To ensure she wouldn't escape, he pinned her arms above her head and asked if she would surrender. This time, Momo was too flustered to respond right away. His face was close to hers, and she felt trapped beneath him, momentarily forgetting that she could use her legs. All she could do was nod as he lifted her up once more. Izuku felt a sense of accomplishment as Momo acknowledged his skills, admitting that she needed to improve. He encouraged her not to underestimate herself, noting how quickly she was picking things up. Their conversation was interrupted by the sound of Momo's phone vibrating, and her expression brightened slightly. Curious, Izuku inquired about the message. Momo explained that it was from her parents, checking up on her. Izuku expressed disappointment that they weren't home, wishing he could say hello. Momo informed him that they were away on a business trip for the week, but promised to pass on his message. She then asked how his mother was doing. Izuku rubbed the back of his neck, mentioning that she was busy and that he had been alone until Momo invited him over. Momo felt a pang of empathy for him, realizing they were both somewhat isolated. Her moment of reflection was interrupted by a message from her mother, causing her cheeks to flush, which caught Izuku's attention. Concerned, he asked if something was wrong. Momo quickly reassured him that everything was fine, explaining that her mother had insisted they send a picture of their sparring session. Izuku felt his own face heat up at the thought, realizing that it was a common request for couples. He tried to calm himself, reminding himself that it was just for her parents. They awkwardly shuffled around to fit into the frame, maintaining a respectful distance. Izuku stood to Momo's left as they both struggled to keep straight faces. When Momo snapped the picture, they quickly separated, taking deep breaths to regain their composure. Momo's mother didn't respond immediately, but Momo could almost hear her laughter in her mind. An awkward silence enveloped them, and they silently wished for a distraction. Just then, a butler announced that the meal Momo had requested was ready, breaking the tension. Momo nervously asked Izuku if he would like to stay for lunch. He looked at her, noticing her own nervousness, which provided him with a small sense of comfort and made him feel more welcome. Izuku stood by the outdoor patio, waiting for Momo to join him. Two servants followed her, carrying steaming bowls and a tray with glasses and a pitcher. Izuku was pleasantly surprised by the sight before him. Raspberry iced tea and katsudon, his favorite dish, reminded him of the time they spent getting to know each other. Momo, misinterpreting his astonishment, felt a wave of panic. She worried that something was wrong with the meal. She had hoped he would enjoy her choices and quickly began to apologize. Izuku reassured her with a simple acknowledgement, expressing how amazing he found the meal. His bright eyes and soft smile calmed Momo, who felt warmth in her heart after his reaction. Without further hesitation, they began to eat. Izuku's enjoyment of the katsudon was evident, filling Momo with joy at her successful choice. He expressed his disbelief that she remembered his preferences from their past. Momo blushed at the compliment, explaining that she hadn't been very socially active lately and wanted to be a good hostess for his visit. Izuku felt a blush creeping onto his cheeks, touched by her thoughtfulness. However, something she said piqued his curiosity, prompting him to inquire further. He mentioned that he thought she would be with her friends. Momo's expression shifted slightly as she revealed that she had chosen to distance herself from them for a while, focusing on her training. Izuku was taken aback by the hint of bitterness in her tone. He sensed that something was amiss within her friend group. She continued, sharing that her week had been lonely, especially with her parents out of town. Though she had her servants, she still felt isolated. Izuku almost instinctively echoed her sentiment, acknowledging that even with others around, loneliness could linger. His voice carried a cold distance, revealing a hint of hurt. He noticed Momo's gaze on him and felt his cheeks heat up again. He quickly apologized, mumbling that he was just thinking aloud. Momo, however, was not ready to let it go. She asked him directly if he felt lonely too, her voice firm yet filled with concern. Izuku, knowing she sought honesty, sighed and opened up about his past. He shared that he had never been the most popular kid, and that being diagnosed as quirkless had made him feel like an outcast. Momo felt a pang of sadness at his words, realizing how harshly society treated those without quirks. The thought of him being without a friend for a decade struck her deeply, and she worried there was more to his story than he revealed. Hesitant to press further, she decided to hold back her questions, though one thought lingered: he hadn't mentioned his father. Their conversation was interrupted by a vibration from Izuku's pocket. He excused himself and pulled out his phone, his face turning bright red. He groaned at the message, prompting Momo to inquire if something was wrong. Izuku explained that his aunt and uncle, who were really close family friends rather than actual relatives, had been insisting on meeting her. Momo felt a blush rise to her cheeks at the idea of his aunt wanting to meet her. Izuku confirmed that he owed his aunt for the helpful advice she had given him during a pivotal moment in his life. Momo recalled the time she had first proposed to him, realizing how stressful that must have been for him. She felt compelled to apologize for her past actions, but Izuku reassured her that it was all right. He understood that her upbringing had shaped her perspective, and she couldn't be blamed for it. Momo offered to arrange a time and place for them to meet, surprising Izuku with her willingness. He agreed to introduce her to his Aunt Mitsuki and Uncle Masaru someday. After finishing their meal, Izuku thanked her and left her estate, feeling lighter and more upbeat from their time together. Meanwhile, Momo's thoughts turned somber as she reflected on Izuku's past. The idea of him being treated like an outcast for so long and having only a few adults to confide in troubled her. Despite everything, Izuku was the kindest and most selfless person she had ever met. The thought of him possibly being bullied tightened her heart. She pulled out her phone and looked at the picture they had taken earlier for her mother, feeling a mix of emotions swirling within her. A tick mark appeared on Yaoyorozu's forehead when she realized who was messaging her. It was from her friend group chat. Jiga asked if Yaoyorozu was available for a mani-pedi. Momo wasn't surprised it was for such a frivolous request. She replied that she was feeling quite fatigued from today's training. Any friend would understand and wished her well in recovering. Akarui expressed disbelief, reminding her that she had said the same thing last time. Awase questioned whether she was actually training, which offended Momo. She retorted, asking if he was implying that she had been dishonest about her training. Awase quickly clarified that he was just suggesting that it would be more effective if she had a good sparring partner, and offered to come over to see what they could do together. Momo declined his offer, feeling a chill from her cold response. She explained that she already had a partner, Midoriya. They had been training rigorously earlier that day. Awase was shocked to learn that Midoriya had been at her house and that she had been training with him. Jiga expressed doubt about her training, suggesting that she had simply been hanging out with Midoriya without them. Akarui asked if she had any proof. Momo couldn't believe her eyes. Her friends were interrogating her. She did have proof, though she was reluctant to share it. To quickly end the conversation, she sent them a photo. The picture showed Izuku and Momo together in a dojo-like room, both sweating and in training attire. The timestamp confirmed it was early afternoon, suggesting they had indeed been working hard. Before she had to endure more accusations or empty apologies, Momo blocked their contacts. The entire situation left her feeling frustrated and dejected. She had never given them a reason to distrust her, and she had always been there for them when they needed her. Yet, there had been many times they failed to return the favor. As she scrolled through her phone's gallery, looking at all the pictures she had taken with her friends since middle school, she felt a mild disgust. The images captured shopping malls, her mansion, her family's yacht, massage parlors, and fancy restaurants. Never once did they have inexpensive outings. She scrolled down to a childhood photo of herself learning to play the piano beside her parents. They had often talked to her about relationships, discussing what a poor relationship entailed, mostly in the context of suitors. Occasionally, they had touched on the people she surrounded herself with. At the time, she believed she was with the right people, but now, reflecting on it, she realized there wasn't much difference between her friends and the opportunists vying for her attention. The reason those opportunists seemed better was that they didn't impose formalities or exchanges like her friends had. The truth was, she had very low standards for a good relationship, except for him. Izuku Midoriya was patient, thoughtful, understanding, helpful, kind, and so much more. Deep down, she felt she didn't deserve to be getting as close to him as she had. If she knew him well enough, he likely felt the same way about her. That realization solidified her decision. She resolved to take action. Surprisingly, deleting all those pictures didn't hurt nearly as much as Momo had expected. It was certainly easier than telling her classmates she had decided to sever their unbalanced friendship. In fact, it felt liberating, as if she were a dove released from a cage. Of course, her friends weren't thrilled about losing their access to her, but Momo no longer cared about their feelings. However, this raised a question: who would keep her company now? She had her loving parents, but they were often consumed with work and unable to spend as much quality time with her as they would like. The house staff held a special place in her heart, but they weren't hired to be her friends. She certainly wasn't going to pay for friends. Those days were over. So that left... Her father called her name, snapping her out of her thoughts. He asked if she was all right, noting that she had seemed distant lately, as if her mind were elsewhere. Momo stiffened slightly. As much as it pained her to admit, stepping away from her former friends left her feeling lonely and somewhat downcast. Her parents had only recently returned and could still read her so easily. Sakusei felt a sense of pride for his daughter as she shared her decision to distance herself from certain friends. It was a challenging step, especially during her teenage years, and the emotional toll was evident. He reassured her, expressing that it was important to prioritize her own happiness. Momo's spirits lifted at his words. However, she still needed something to boost her self-esteem. The hurt from her former friends lingered, and she knew exactly who could help her heal. Sakusei playfully mentioned that they had preparations to make. Momo, puzzled, asked if he had forgotten about their annual summer solstice ball, the highlight of their year. Her eyes widened in realization. She had completely overlooked her favorite event. Every year, her family hosted a grand celebration for friends and family, filled with delicious food, lively music, ballroom dancing, entertainment, and a spectacular fireworks display to conclude the evening. It was an unforgettable experience, yet, in recent days, she had been trying to avoid thoughts of her old friends, which only hindered her enjoyment. Sakusei encouraged her to think about someone she might want to invite, leaving Momo to reflect on her situation. Ultimately, she knew there was only one person she wanted to ask. At the Midoriya household, Izuku and Inko were enjoying a peaceful day together, watching television. Izuku remarked on how long it had been since they had time to relax. Inko agreed, mentioning the demands of her job at the hospital and the chaos surrounding Izuku's romantic interests. Izuku blushed at his mother's teasing. As their show ended, Izuku's phone buzzed with a message. Inko, already guessing who it was, encouraged him to check. He opened the notification and felt his cheeks warm at Momo's formal tone. Momo requested a moment of his time, sounding nervous. Izuku, familiar with her, sensed something was bothering her. She invited him to a party at her home, mentioning she wanted to discuss something important. Izuku felt a mix of excitement and concern, realizing she had recently distanced herself from her friend group, which he believed was for the best. He expressed his sympathy for her situation, and Momo reassured him it was okay, but admitted she didn't want to feel alone. She asked if he could accompany her, and Izuku readily agreed, emphasizing that she was not being selfish, but rather navigating a tough time. Momo felt a blush creep onto her cheeks as she read his response, looking forward to seeing him. Izuku, thrilled at the invitation, contemplated the significance of the event. It wasn't just a casual gathering. It was a grand party, and he wondered if he should wear a tuxedo. When he approached his mother to share his excitement, he found her focused on a black and gold invitation. Izuku leaned in to read it over her shoulder, recognizing the elegant invitation to the Yaoyorozu's summer solstice ball. It promised a night of enchantment, complete with first-class catering, superb entertainment, and a magical evening under the stars, all with the assurance of safety provided by numerous pro heroes in attendance. Izuku Midoriya received an elegant invitation to a lavish party hosted by the Yaoyorozu family, specifically Momo's parents. It seemed like the Midoriyas could never have a day of rest. In search of formal attire, Izuku and his mother Inko found themselves in a tuxedo rental store. Inko had rushed him there after a near heart attack when he suggested wearing his favorite dress shirt t-shirt. The situation escalated when she insisted he couldn't wear his beloved red sneakers. Inko checked off items on her list, feeling confident about Izuku's outfit and manners. However, the dance remained a concern. Izuku expressed his anxiety about dancing, feeling completely unprepared. Inko, with a bright smile, assured him she knew just the right person to help. At the Bakugo residence, Izuku stood nervously at the door, questioning why he needed Aunt Mitsuki's assistance once more. When Mitsuki opened the door, she immediately teased him about not bringing his girlfriend along. Izuku, flustered, requested to come inside and explain his predicament. Mitsuki, eager to assist, playfully remarked on his relationship status and offered unexpected advice. She suggested that he let his partner take the lead, as she was likely skilled at dancing. Mitsuki then decided to teach him some basic steps. As they began, Izuku felt a rush of embarrassment from their close proximity. Mitsuki guided him through the movements, emphasizing the importance of focusing on his partner to make her feel special. Later that night, Momo Yayorozu sat on her windowsill, feeling restless as she prepared for the upcoming event. Despite the late hour, thoughts of her friend's judgment weighed heavily on her mind. She questioned her worth and wondered if Izuku shared similar doubts about her. Meanwhile, Izuku was filled with mixed emotions as he prepared for the party. He reflected on his checklist of formal wear, dance practice, and his ongoing struggle with self-confidence. This was his first invitation to such a high-class event, and he sensed that something significant was about to happen. As the evening approached, Izuku arrived at the Yayorozu residence, feeling overwhelmed by its grandeur. Clutching the invitation nervously, he approached the entrance, suddenly feeling a sense of unease when he felt a familiar arm around his shoulder. Earlier, Away stood outside the gate, grappling with his decision to come. He felt unwelcome and questioned how he could apologize to Momo if he couldn't even enter. His frustration was interrupted when he spotted Izuku walking by, dressed sharply and holding an invitation. Awase's anger flared as he realized Momo had invited Izuku but not him. In that moment, a plan began to form in his mind. Present, Awase devised a plan to gain entry alongside Izuku and reclaim his girl. Izuku felt a mix of confusion and discomfort as Awase casually draped an arm around his shoulder. Awase greeted him with an overly friendly tone, which made Izuku uneasy. As they approached the imposing four-armed bouncer, he felt the weight of the man's gaze, causing him to sweat. The bouncer demanded their names. Awase confidently introduced himself, but the bouncer's reaction was immediate and cold, instructing him to leave. Izuku stammered, trying to introduce himself, but the bouncer interrupted, welcoming him to the party with unexpected warmth, mentioning that the young mistress had been waiting for him. Izuku was taken aback by the revelation, while Awase simmered with jealousy, wondering why he hadn't received an invitation from Momo. As they prepared to enter, the bouncer warned Awase to remove his arm from Izuku's shoulder, prompting Awase to comply immediately. Awase protested, claiming that Momo must have intended to invite him as well, but the bouncers dismissed him, stating that no one had mentioned his name in a long time. Awase felt a pang of disappointment, realizing he was not welcome. He turned to Izuku, hoping for support, but Izuku hesitated, recalling Momo's earlier words about not inviting Awase and his friends. Just then, a mature and elegant voice interrupted their exchange. Ai Yaoyorozu, the esteemed co-hostess of the party and Momo's mother, appeared at the entrance with a glass of wine. The boys found themselves momentarily speechless under her gaze, captivated by her stunning red dress. The bouncer informed Ai that one of the young men was about to leave. Izuku's heart sank, feeling responsible for the awkward situation and worried about his standing with Momo's family. However, his face lit up upon seeing Izuku, and she expressed her delight at his arrival, inviting him to join her and emphasizing the importance of not keeping a lady waiting. Izuku blushed at her attention, unsure if she referred to herself or Momo. He quickly apologized and followed her as the bouncer stepped aside. Awase called out to Ai, but her demeanor shifted, and she acknowledged him with mild annoyance. She recalled that Momo had mentioned him, but clarified that her daughter had instructed her not to allow him entry. With that, Awase was left outside, feeling the sting of rejection. Izuku was surprised by Ai's firm stance, and when she asked if he would join her, he quickly agreed, eager to follow her lead. As they walked, Ai noticed Izuku's fidgeting and inquired if something was wrong. Izuku explained that he was taken aback by her use of his first name. Ai raised an eyebrow, questioning if it was an issue. He quickly reassured her that it was fine, just unexpected. She giggled at his response and asked how he had been enjoying his time with Momo. Izuku was momentarily caught off guard but answered sincerely, expressing how much he appreciated her presence in his life. Ai's eyes sparkled at his words, and she shared that Momo often spoke of him with a glimmer of joy. She noted how Momo had become more active and driven lately, attributing this change to Izuku's influence. Izuku felt his face heat up at the compliment, humbly attributing Momo's qualities to her own nature. However, Ai's expression turned serious as she mentioned some concerns. She acknowledged Momo's exceptional nature, but expressed worry about the lack of attention she received from her parents. Izuku reassured her, recognizing the challenges of running a world-renowned company while still loving and supporting Momo. He emphasized that Ai and her husband were doing their best, and that Momo undoubtedly appreciated their efforts. Ai gazed at the young man with wide eyes, surprised by his understanding nature. She was reminded once again of why he was such a precious gem. She expressed her gratitude, acknowledging that while she appreciated his compliments, they did not change the fact that her daughter often felt alone. Naturally, her daughter valued those who chose to spend time with her, but after the fallout with her last group of friends, things had become complicated. Suddenly, Izuku interrupted her thoughts with an apology, though he wasn't entirely sure why he felt compelled to do so. He reflected on how her daughter's friendships had started to deteriorate after he entered the picture. He didn't blame her friends. It was often challenging to open up to new people. If her friends were struggling because of him, he felt a sense of responsibility. I wished her daughter had met him sooner. She inquired if he had spent time with the children her daughter once considered friends, and whether he felt welcomed by them. Izuku contemplated her question, but found himself at a loss for words. He understood that leaving behind long-lasting relationships was difficult, yet it was an important learning experience for her. While he hated that she was in pain, he also felt proud of her and grateful to him. Izuku felt a wave of emotion wash over him during their conversation. Since the earlier incident at the entrance, he had been tense. He acknowledged that thanks to Ai, her daughter was beginning to recognize how harmful those past relationships had been and what a healthy relationship should look like. She deserved better, just like her hero, and he felt a warmth in his chest at the thought. Ai sighed, apologizing for the heavy conversation and encouraging him to enjoy the party. After what felt like a long journey, they finally arrived at the Grand Hall. Before she could leave, Izuku made a promise that resonated deeply with her. He vowed to do everything in his power to make her daughter happy, his determination clear and unwavering. Ace Eye smiled at him, trusting he would take good care of her child before she left to enjoy the evening, feeling more confident about her daughter's future happiness. Incredible, astonishing, and remarkable were just a few words that barely captured what Izuku was experiencing. The formally dressed boy stood in the expansive hall of the Yaoyorozu mansion, surrounded by local and exotic cuisine, with an upper-class band playing music. However, what truly captivated him was the array of heroes mingling with guests or ensuring their safety. As he poured himself a glass of sparkling apple cider, he tried to calm his nerves. He was surrounded by legends like Best Jeanist, Mount Lady, Kamui Woods, and Burnin. He reminded himself to keep it together. While Izuku awkwardly shuffled around, searching for Momo, a certain hot-headed pro-hero observed him with a mix of curiosity and irritation. Unbeknownst to Izuku, he was under the watchful gaze of Japan's #2 hero, Endeavor. Endeavor wondered who the boy was. If he were the child of a pro-hero or the heir to a business tycoon, he wouldn't be wandering alone. He questioned why the Yaoyorozu lady had personally ushered him in, noting that they didn't appear to be related, and the family had only one daughter. It was clear the boy had a close connection with the Yaoyorozus, but Endeavor hoped he wouldn't interfere with Shoto's future. Izuku, unaware of Endeavor's scrutiny, felt a burning sensation on the back of his neck. Familiar with that feeling, he decided he could use some fresh air. He took his drink and stepped outside, where he found a small group of people who seemed to share his sentiment. As he began to regain his composure, he noticed a bi-colored teen about his age standing alone. The boy appeared sad, prompting Izuku to approach him. He hesitantly asked if he was all right. The boy turned to him with a cold gaze, causing Izuku to freeze as he met his heterochromatic eyes. Up close, he noticed the striking contrast of red on one side and white on the other, with a burn scar adding to the intimidating presence. The boy acknowledged him with a simple statement. Izuku felt a wave of anxiety wash over him, fearing he had upset someone he had just met. The boy remarked on Izuku's connection to the family hosting the event, making him regret initiating the conversation. He stammered, trying to downplay his relationship with the Yaoyorosis, but the boy cut him off, leaving Izuku feeling even more intimidated. Despite his body trembling and urging him to escape the conversation, Izuku continued speaking with the emo teen. He nervously inquired about the boy's relationship with the hosts, asking if he was close to them. The boy's expression grew colder, and a scowl formed as he directed his gaze at the now genuinely frightened Greenette. "My father is the hero, Endeavor. I'm sure you've heard of him," he finally admitted, almost with a hint of shame. "I was brought along to meet the Yaoyorosis for some kind of partnership. Please excuse me if I don't seem thrilled to be here." The angsty teen began to walk away, leaving a surprised Izuku behind. Izuku, feeling a surge of courage, asked if the boy wanted to talk about his feelings. The boy halted and turned back to Izuku, who expressed that it could help to share what was bothering him. This sudden assertiveness caught the boy off guard. While the son of Endeavor was not the most sociable person, he had encountered those who recognized him. It was always the same comments, admiration for his lineage and expectations for greatness. No one outside his family had ever inquired about his feelings, and this simple question stirred a flicker of warmth within him. Curious, he asked for Izuku's name. Izuku introduced himself, extending a hand, which the bicolored teen accepted. Shoto Todoroki, likewise. "Would you believe me if I said even the greatest heroes can be disappointing?" Izuku responded affirmatively, understanding all too well. Meanwhile, Momo stood before her mirror, assessing her appearance. Her hair was down and slightly curled, adorned in a stripless red dress with a yellow belt and red heels. Eager to join the party and meet someone special, she hesitated, wanting to avoid any potential disruptions to her perfect night. She awaited her parents' approval. A knock at her door startled her. "Your guest of honor has arrived, sweetheart," I announced as she entered. Momo inquired if anyone had accompanied him, and I reassured her that a minor complication at the entrance had been resolved. Momo sighed in relief, expressing her desire for the evening to be just her and Izuku. I smiled as her daughter headed to the party, wishing her to have fun. Once Momo was out of sight, Ai's expression shifted. She hoped that Izuku would provide her daughter with the joy that money couldn't buy before revealing the intentions of the Todoroki family. Back at the party, Midoriya and Todoroki sat at a table, splitting small portions of food, both hoping they were merely appetizers. Shoto asked if someone had told Izuku he couldn't be a hero. Izuku clarified that while those weren't the exact words, they might as well have been, recalling how the person's smile faded when he asked. Izuku encouraged Shoto, stating that just because there was no precedent didn't mean it couldn't be achieved. He acknowledged that while Shoto might not become number one and some villains were formidable, power wasn't everything. Not every villain could destroy a city, and trying to measure up to someone like All Might would only lead to disappointment. Izuku absorbed Shoto's words, feeling a small smile form. Shortly after, Shoto left, possibly to inquire about Soba, leaving Izuku alone but not lonely. There was something he truly wanted to do. A voice suddenly called to him, asking if he would care to dance. Initially, the words sent Izuku's heart racing, but something felt off. The voice didn't sound like Momo's. Turning around, he was met with the sight of Midnight, one of Japan's most alluring heroes, dressed in a dark purple gown that faded to black, featuring a deep V-neck and a slit that revealed part of her left thigh. Izuku took a moment to process the situation. One of the most captivating pros in Japan was inviting him to dance. He felt flattered, truly, but he was waiting for someone to arrive and apologized. The older lady smirked, curious about who the lucky person was. Before he could respond, the sound of heels clicking against the floor approached his table. He turned to see Momo in a stunning dress with her hair cascading down. In that moment, he thought of her as an angel-faced goddess. Midnight noticed the sparkle in his eyes and decided to leave them be, but not without a playful remark. She told him that perhaps they would meet again, leaving him blushing deeply. Momo approached him, slightly pouting and apologizing for keeping him waiting. He quickly stood up, eager to clarify that it was merely teasing and nothing more. He felt the need to apologize since Momo seemed a bit upset. To make amends, he took her hand, looked into her eyes, and complimented her beauty. Her annoyance faded away as warmth spread across her face. She thanked him and returned the compliment, saying he looked very handsome. With a bright smile, she asked if he would like to dance. He agreed, and they made their way to the dance floor, blending in with the other couples. As they danced, Momo wrapped her arms around his neck while he held her waist. He utilized the dance lessons he had taken, and their hearts raced with excitement. Despite the intensity of the moment, they felt a serene peace in each other's presence. Momo complimented his dancing, and he humbly credited his aunt for her help. She expressed her hope that she hadn't kept him waiting too long, to which he reassured her that he had found someone new to talk to. Momo noticed his gaze drift toward Shoto, dancing with Burnin, and a hint of discomfort stirred within her, but she pushed it aside for the sake of their perfect evening. As the song neared its end, Momo decided to take a bold step and pressed her forehead against his. Was it slightly awkward due to her heels, but she managed. He felt his heart race even faster from the sudden closeness, grateful that the dance was simple enough for him to focus. When the song concluded, they separated but continued to gaze into each other's eyes, still holding on to one another. He struggled to find words, overwhelmed by the experience of their first dance, while she giggled at his adorableness. They stepped outside to catch their breath, with Momo fanning her face and clutching her chest, reflecting on her moment of bravery. Just then, Izuku offered her a plate of food, and she thanked him. Before they could start eating, she took his hand and led him away from the other guests into a darker area. She lifted her dress slightly and revealed a lantern and a blanket, suggesting a picnic despite the late hour. She spread out the blanket and lit the lantern, and he sat down without hesitation. He remarked on how romantic it was, and she expressed her hope that he would enjoy it while thanking him for the food. They began to eat, savoring the delicious meal under the gentle glow of the lantern and the stars above. It felt perfect, but the moment was fleeting. Curious about his conversation with Todoroki, Momo expressed her concerns about his father. Izuku swallowed hard, admitting that Todoroki had been intense at first, but he had seen a lonely kid and wanted to reach out. They had a meaningful conversation, and he felt that perhaps he had made a new friend. Typically, Izuku's radiant smiles made Momo's heart race, but at that moment, they created a heavy feeling she struggled to shake off. She managed to express her appreciation, but Izuku could see through her forced smile and lack of enthusiasm. He felt a pang of regret, realizing he had unintentionally reminded her of her past friendships that had soured. The atmosphere between them grew awkward, and they exchanged few glances. It seemed as if the moment had slipped away, but Momo attempted to break the silence. She asked Izuku if he had encountered any difficulties on his way to the event. He responded that at the gate, Awase had tried to join him as his +1, likely out of jealousy for being invited. Thankfully, Momo's mother had intervened. Momo lowered her gaze, feeling embarrassed, and apologized for the trouble. As the mood continued to decline, Izuku knew he needed to address the issue weighing on her mind. He gently mentioned that her mother had shared that she had been feeling somewhat lonely. Momo tensed at his words. Izuku reassured her that she had done nothing wrong, and that the problem lay with those who had betrayed her trust. He understood how painful it was to feel like there was something wrong with oneself after being let down by friends. He emphasized that she deserved as much as she had given, and that her choice of companions had been misguided. He assured her that he wasn't judging her, as he had faced similar experiences. He reminded her that those who had been around her had done so for the wrong reasons, and that she had much more to offer than just her wealth. Momo's cheeks flushed deeply as she covered her mouth with her hand, struggling to hold back tears. Despite her efforts, they began to fall silently. Izuku noticed and took out a handkerchief from his blazer pocket, feeling a surge of confidence as he gently wiped her tears away. He then took the bold step of inviting her to lean on his shoulder, a move that felt right, even if it meant some of her makeup smudged onto his tuxedo. They resumed their meal, and the atmosphere around them felt more perfect than before. After a few moments, Izuku and Momo returned inside after finishing their meal. Momo led Izuku away, and he felt a mix of excitement and nervousness as she held his hand and guided him to an unknown destination. She simply told him they were going somewhere private, which only heightened his anxiety. After navigating through the halls, Momo brought him to a large pair of doors, where the sounds of the party faded away. Upon opening the doors, Izuku was amazed to find an expansive bedroom, complete with a grand bed, a bookshelf filled with encyclopedias, a large vanity, and a table draped in a white sheet. As Momo pulled him inside, Izuku's mind raced with thoughts of being in a girl's room. She guided him to sit on a cushioned windowsill while she approached the table. When he asked what she was doing, she smiled, her cheeks flushed with excitement. She reminded him of his earlier wish to hear her play the piano. Izuku nodded, feeling a mix of anticipation and awe as Momo unveiled a beautiful wooden piano. At a loss for words, Izuku stammered, but Momo silenced him with a gentle gesture. She encouraged him to relax and enjoy the moment, then took her seat at the piano and began to play an upbeat melody. The next song she played was one that Izuku would always remember. After finishing, Izuku jumped up from his seat and applauded her enthusiastically, expressing how beautiful the performance was and how elegant every note felt. Momo blushed and graciously thanked him, revealing that this was her first time playing for anyone outside her family. They settled together on Momo's small balcony, the cool night breeze flowing through the open window. The room was softly lit by the stars and the full moon, and the distant chatter of guests provided a pleasant backdrop. Their shoulders brushed against each other due to the limited space, creating a perfect moment. Momo felt it was time to take a leap of faith. She called out to Izuku, who turned his full attention to her. Izuku found himself taken aback by the suddenness of the question. Momo continued, expressing her desire for clarity about their relationship after spending considerable time together, helping and learning from one another. She didn't want to feel uncertain or misled. Recognizing the courage it took for Momo to voice her feelings, Izuku noticed her nervousness as she fidgeted with her fingers and avoided eye contact. His instinct was to reassure her to dispel any fears she might have. He began to speak, but she interrupted, clarifying that it wasn't her friends who had influenced her thoughts. She genuinely wanted to understand his feelings, and if he needed time to respond, she would respect that. As Izuku reflected on his feelings for Momo, he realized how kind, intelligent, and beautiful she was. She was truly remarkable, and it felt as if they had known each other for years, despite only having spent a month together. Taking a deep breath, he looked Momo in the eye. He expressed that she was incredible, listing her many admirable qualities. He believed she was the most amazing person he had ever met, kind, patient, helpful, loyal, and humble. He admired how she treated everyone with respect, a trait he cherished deeply. Momo's heart raced at his words, particularly when he mentioned love. She admitted to struggling with their relationship as well, and felt unworthy of his kindness. She acknowledged that he could have someone better than a shy person like herself. Izuku was taken aback by her sudden seriousness as she held his shoulder. She questioned how someone so remarkable could have such a poor self-image. She reminded him of the sacrifices he had made for her, how he had supported her through her challenges without complaint, and how he had helped her grow despite the complications she had brought into his life. She insisted he deserved more than material wealth could offer. Izuku was astonished by Momo's passionate response. She had tears in her eyes as she continued, revealing her struggles with depression after distancing herself from her classmates. She felt pathetic for still being tied to them, even when she knew they didn't truly care. Yet he remained involved in her life, and she felt overwhelmed. He interrupted her, gently wiping away her tears, reminding her that overcoming betrayal was not easy. It could break people, but she was still striving to improve herself. He pointed out her strength, which she often failed to recognize. In that moment, they both realized how their feelings mirrored one another. Izuku thought about how much he had been saved by her presence, while Momo reflected on how her life had improved since meeting him. Finally, they both shouted out what they had been longing to express. With tears in their eyes and a whirlwind of emotions swirling within them, they finally voiced their feelings. They shared a moment of silence, their tears flowing freely, before laughter broke through the tension. They found humor in their shared struggles. Izuku remarked on their mutual disasters, and Momo agreed with a bright smile as she settled onto her bed. She suggested they not dwell on who was worse, or they would never accomplish anything. Izuku found it fitting to mimic her actions, joining her in the moment. Izuku stood in front of Momo, a determined look on his face as he prepared to answer her question. Momo appeared slightly puzzled, her brow furrowing in curiosity. He gently held her cheeks in his hands, and in a moment that felt surreal, he leaned in and kissed her. It was a soft, tender kiss that left Momo momentarily speechless. He expressed his feelings, telling her how he saw her as the most beautiful, intelligent, and kind-hearted person, and that he loved her. The confession was a challenge for him, but he managed to get the words out, and it felt rewarding. Momo's eyes filled with tears as she reached up to hold him close, overwhelmed by his sincerity. She exclaimed that she could write an entire book about how wonderful he was. Izuku remained quiet, comforting her with gentle strokes on her back. When she finally pulled away, she looked at him with longing in her eyes. Timidly, she asked if she could have another kiss. Izuku blushed, surprised by her boldness, but he leaned in again, sharing a brief kiss that ignited a spark between them. Momo stood up, pulling him in for another kiss, which caught him off guard at first, but he quickly melted into it. This kiss lasted longer, and they both lost track of time, only breaking apart when they needed to breathe. Momo apologized for her eagerness, but Izuku reassured her that there was no need for apologies. They shared another kiss, this time filled with more passion. Their kisses became more intense, and they took small breaks to breathe, allowing their emotions to guide them. Eventually, they found themselves on Momo's bed, with her beneath him. Izuku, feeling bold, kissed her neck, eliciting a delightful sound from her. Momo's fingers tangled in his hair as she enjoyed the moment, and they exchanged sweet sounds of surprise and pleasure. After a moment of catching their breath, they looked into each other's eyes, both flushed with excitement. They knew they were crossing boundaries, but neither wanted to stop. Izuku commented on the potential trouble they might face, tossing his blazer aside. Momo, biting her finger lightly, asked if he wanted to stop. He questioned if she would think less of him if he said no, to which she replied that she wouldn't at all. They spent the night lost in their passionate connection, completely absorbed in each other. The next morning, Izuku awoke feeling more refreshed than ever. However, as he opened his eyes, he realized something was amiss. This was not his room, and the bed felt far too luxurious. Panic set in as he processed that he was in Momo's mansion. Memories of the previous night flooded back, and he felt a rush of adrenaline. He was startled to discover he was only partially dressed. Confused, he looked down and saw a pair of arms wrapped around him. The realization hit him hard. He had spent the night with Momo. The thought sent his heart racing, and he felt a wave of anxiety wash over him as he considered what her parents might think. Just then, he heard Momo's sleepy voice asking for 5 more minutes, and he froze, worrying about how she would react to the situation. He decided to gently squeeze her arms, but that only made her hold him tighter. Momo, in a sleepy voice, expressed her desire to visit Italy for their honeymoon. Izuku was taken aback by her words, wondering if she was dreaming or teasing him. His thoughts were interrupted when he felt something warm and wet against his neck. It was endearing yet slightly off-putting. He whispered her name, hoping to wake her gently. Momo mumbled about wanting to travel, and Izuku was left puzzled by her words. As she shifted, he felt a soft pressure against his back, and he couldn't help but feel a mix of emotions. He was envious of her peaceful dreams, while he faced the stresses of reality. However, when she softly declared her love for him, All his negative feelings faded away, replaced by a sense of peace and belonging. Perhaps he could indulge in a little more rest after the previous night's events. As Momo stirred awake, Izuku felt a mix of affection and mild disgust when she sneezed adorably but unexpectedly on his back. Despite the awkward moment, he couldn't bring himself to be upset, especially as he admired her morning appearance. Even with her disheveled hair and sleepy eyes, she looked like a goddess to him, and he was momentarily lost in admiration. Momo, noticing Izuku, felt a rush of warmth as her eyes fell on his exposed upper body. They shared a moment of surprise, both feeling a bit flustered. When they glanced down at the same time, they realized that Momo's strapless bra had slipped, leaving her feeling exposed as well. They both let out surprised yelps, and Momo quickly grabbed a blanket to cover herself while Izuku stumbled off the edge of the bed. Their voices filled the room as they demanded answers and apologized profusely, both feeling embarrassed by the situation. After a few moments of discussing the previous night, they acknowledged their recklessness, but agreed they wouldn't change a thing. The only regret was not being more presentable when Momo's parents and Izuku's mother unexpectedly entered the room, catching them in a rather compromising state. Meanwhile, unbeknownst to them, Yaoyorozu had been watching from outside the door, her expression shifting from shock to delight as she witnessed their affection. She had grown curious after they disappeared from the party and found them in Momo's bedroom. Trying not to disturb them, she cracked the door open slightly, hearing laughter and confessions of love. Her heart swelled with happiness for them, but her emotions shifted when she heard soft sounds coming from inside. Peeking back into the room, she realized the situation was escalating. She saw Izuku removing his blazer and heard them agree to embrace the moment. Unsure of how to process what she was witnessing, Ai quietly closed the door, wishing she could erase the memory of what she had just seen. Unfortunately, her phone vibrated, pulling her back to reality. Inko reached out to Ai, expressing her concern about Izuku's whereabouts as it was getting late and she couldn't contact him. Ai felt a surge of panic upon reading the message, unsure of how to respond. How could she explain to a mother that her son was preoccupied with a girl at a party? There was no gentle way to phrase it. Ai replied to Inko, confirming that Izuku was still at her place, but he and Momo were rather focused on each other at the moment. Inko's response indicated her understanding but reminded Ai to let Izuku know about his curfew. It was an interesting twist that Izuku had never had a curfew before, as he had never been out late with friends. Now, on his first night out, he was about to break that curfew without even a phone call, all thanks to Momo. I felt the need to warn Inko that Izuku might be running late. Inko's confusion grew as she pressed for details, asking what could possibly keep her son from answering his phone. I explained that Izuku and Momo were likely having a deep conversation, promising that it would be easier to explain in person the next day. The situation was far from easy. Now, sitting in Momo's room, still in their clothes from the previous night, the teens faced the disappointment of their parents. Momo's mother looked particularly upset, while Izuku's father appeared more frustrated than anything else. Momo nervously acknowledged their presence, and I confirmed they had indeed caught the two in a compromising situation. Izuku, feeling the weight of the moment, asked if his mother had tried to call him. Inko confirmed she had, and her tone was icy as she suggested he check his phone. Izuku's heart sank as he pulled out his device, his eyes widening at the barrage of missed notifications. Sakuse, visibly irritated, lamented that they had been left unsupervised for just one night, and this was the result. The gravity of his words made both Izuku and Momo wish they could disappear. Inko firmly stated they were leaving, and Izuku stood up, silently apologizing to Momo as he exited the room. Sakuse then turned his attention to Momo, who braced herself for a stern lecture. Later, in the car with Inko, Izuku felt small as she expressed her disappointment. She reminded him of the consequences of his actions, emphasizing that while she understood the emotional moment he shared with Momo, it couldn't excuse what had happened. Suddenly, she stopped the car and instructed him to look at his phone again. Flashing back to the previous night, Inko recalled a conversation with Mitsuki, who had been eager for details about Izuku's date night. Inko had been unable to provide any information, only revealing that he was at Momo's house. Mitsuki's reaction had been one of shock, suggesting that Izuku should be brought home immediately. Back in the present, Inko locked the car doors, revealing that she wasn't the only one trying to reach him. She pressed a button on her phone, and Izuku's heart raced as he realized what was happening. Before he could finish his thought, the door to the Bakugo house swung open, revealing a furious Mitsuki. Izuku felt a wave of fear wash over him as she called his name in a low, menacing tone. Inko then informed him that he would be walking home, driving off, and leaving him behind. He pleaded for her to come back, but his cries fell on deaf ears. Mitsuki seized him by the collar, dragging him toward the house. Her voice was firm as she told him he had some explaining to do, and that was the last thing he heard before being taken inside to face the consequences of his actions. An hour later, Izuku returned home, dragging his feet and feeling utterly exhausted. He finally arrived at his house, passing by Inko, who was enjoying a platter of leftovers from the Yaoyorozu family. As he made his way to his room, Inko informed him that he was grounded for the weekend. However, after everything he had experienced with his aunt Mitsuki, that was the least of his worries. He did the only thing he could think of, crawled into bed and sank into his feelings of shame. Meanwhile, in the Yaoyorozu household, Momo was nestled in her luxurious sheets, overwhelmed by her own sense of shame regarding her recent actions. Her parents were in the master bedroom, with Sakusei sipping a cup of lavender tea to soothe his nerves. I, sitting beside him, remarked on how thoroughly he had reprimanded their daughter. She asked if he thought he had been too harsh. Sakusei acknowledged the possibility, but I pointed out that despite the morning's unexpected turn of events, they could at least confirm that Momo and Izuku were officially a couple. Sakusei covered his mouth and whispered that this could pose a problem. I, sensing the gravity of the situation, braced herself for what he was about to say. Sakusei revealed that Endeavor, the number 2 hero, had approached him with a proposition. I groaned, recalling the reasons behind Izuku's swift acceptance into their circle. Endeavor had a notorious reputation for his relentless pursuit of greatness, even going so far as to have children with the intent of creating a powerful heir to fulfill his ambitions. His single-minded focus had turned him into a man who rarely showed remorse. Now, he was suggesting a quirk marriage between his youngest son and their daughter, which explained Shoto's presence at the party. Just as Momo and Izuku were beginning to find their footing together, this hot-headed individual threatened to disrupt everything. I expressed her concern, questioning whether Endeavor would resort to intimidating a quirkless child. Sakusei admitted he was fearful of the answer, especially since Momo already felt burdened by her problems, and now this new complication loomed over them. Frustrated, Sakusei rubbed his eyes, while I suggested that they should leave the matter in the hands of their children. This caused Sakusei to turn to her in surprise, acknowledging that while Izuku might not come from a prestigious family, he had his own strengths. It was clear to see the positive influence he had on Momo. If the rumors from the previous night were true, she would not tolerate whatever the number 2 hero intended. Meanwhile, Momo had changed into her casual clothes and lay on her side in bed, clutching a large pillow tightly and feeling quite dejected. Grounded for the weekend, she was forbidden from stepping outside her bedroom for any reason. What troubled her the most, however, was her current action. She hugged her pillow to mimic the sensation of holding Izuku. She thought to herself that just one night had made her feel so attached. What had he done to her? Lost in her thoughts, she longed for someone to confide in. Fortunately, her parents had never restricted her phone privileges. In the Midoriya household, Izuku found himself feeling even more embarrassed. Lying on his side, he had wrapped himself in his blanket to recreate the feeling of being embraced by Momo. Just one night had made him feel so attached as well. His thoughts were interrupted by a notification from his phone. Although he couldn't leave his room except for bathroom breaks, his phone privileges remained intact. Momo sent a message greeting him, and he responded with a simple hello. Their conversation began awkwardly. Momo inquired about his well-being, to which he admitted he could be better, having faced some stern reprimands and being grounded for the weekend. Momo revealed that she was in the same situation and asked if there was anything he wanted to discuss. Izuku hesitated, unsure if there was much to say. Momo acknowledged that they had said and done things that led to their current predicament, and they both reflected on it. After a moment of silence, they both picked up their devices again and typed simultaneously, expressing how much they missed each other. They froze for a moment before sharing a laugh, realizing they were both a bit of a mess. Momo mentioned that it might seem odd to feel this way after just one night, especially since they hadn't done much, but she admitted it felt quite lonely. Izuku empathized, confessing he didn't know how he would manage to fall asleep that night, acknowledging their shared strangeness. Momo playfully reminded him that he had woken up first and enjoyed the peaceful morning before their parents arrived. Izuku paused, surprised to learn that Momo had indeed been asleep. He wondered what had led him to think otherwise. Curiously, he mentioned that she talked in her sleep, prompting Momo to ask what she had said. As he recounted the adorable and slightly amusing things she had mumbled, Momo's cheeks flushed with embarrassment, and she buried herself deeper into her sheets. He reassured her that it was perfectly fine, and that he found it endearing, noting that she hadn't said anything inappropriate. Momo, feeling the need for breakfast and a bit of relief, decided to get up. Izuku, understanding her need for space, bid her farewell. In a moment of vulnerability, Momo expressed her feelings for him, and it took Izuku a moment to fully grasp the significance of her words. Once he did, joy filled him, and he reciprocated her feelings. They both smiled, setting aside their devices, and lay in bed, happier than ever before. In the Todoroki household, Shoto lay on his bed, staring at the ceiling. His father had left for work in an unusually cheerful mood, prompting Shoto to seek something to occupy his time beyond rigorous training. He reached for his phone and sent a message. After a brief silence, he received a response from Midoriya, who was also looking for someone to talk to. Shoto bluntly stated his boredom, and Midoriya explained that he was currently unoccupied as well. When Shoto inquired about Midoriya's lack of beach training, he learned that Midoriya had been grounded for returning home late, which resonated with Shoto. Midoriya expressed understanding towards his mother's concern for him, sharing how grateful he was for her support. This made Shoto reflect on his own relationship with his mother, making him feel a twinge of regret for the time spent resenting his father instead. Midoriya checked in on Shoto, sensing something was off. Shoto acknowledged that Midoriya's mother sounded wonderful and expressed a desire to meet her. Midoriya hesitated, noting that they had only just met the previous night. Shoto, realizing he might have been too forward, apologized, admitting his struggles with social interactions. Midoriya reciprocated, sharing his own insecurities about being awkward. Their conversation was interrupted by a voice from the kitchen, calling Shoto to breakfast. He excused himself, thanking Midoriya for the chat. As he read Shoto's words, Izuku felt a surge of happiness and pride, celebrating the bond they had formed. Meanwhile, Shoto entered the kitchen, where his siblings Natsuo and Fuyumi were enjoying breakfast. He greeted them, surprising them with his presence. Fuyumi asked if he had slept well, and he confirmed that he had. His siblings exchanged curious glances, but he brushed off their looks as he began to eat. After finishing his meal, Shoto complimented Fuyumi's cooking, which prompted Natsuo to voice his confusion over Shoto's recent behavior. Fuyumi defended Shoto, suggesting that his newfound positivity was a good thing. Shoto then hinted at having made a new friend at the party the night before, leaving his siblings in a state of shock, each processing the news in their own way. Natsu exclaimed with surprise that Shoto had made a friend, expressing that it was quite an unusual development. He was genuinely excited for his brother, while Shoto hesitantly shared that he believed they were friends. He explained how the other boy had approached him, and they had engaged in conversation, discovering shared interests and supporting each other through their challenges. They even exchanged phone numbers to stay connected, which Shoto recognized as a sign of friendship. Hearing this, Natsuo and Fuyumi felt a wave of sympathy for their younger brother. It was touching to see Shoto experience happiness from having a friend for the first time, and it was evident he wanted to cherish this new bond. However, they also sensed that he was venturing into unfamiliar territory, which might have made him anxious about making mistakes. The siblings shared a protective instinct toward him. Fuyumi reassured Shoto that what he described were indeed the actions of good friends, and it seemed he had found a meaningful connection. Shoto mentioned that his friend had accepted him without any judgment regarding his lineage, leaving Natsuo and Fuyumi in awe of this boy's character, torn between admiration and concern for Shoto's well-being. Fuyumi suggested inviting his friend over for dinner, expressing her eagerness to meet him. Natsuo echoed her sentiment, expressing curiosity about this new acquaintance. Shoto glanced at the dark screen of his phone, contemplating the idea before deciding to think it over.